It's a headline I don't think I've seen before. Mass IT outage across the world. Some people probably just easing into the morning may not have noticed yet. My wife got in touch to say that the local shop wasn't able to operate. The tills in Morrison's were doolally. I think today's one of those days where we can be a little bit demob happy. I'm not least because it's my last show for a couple of weeks, which means that some absolutely important international event will occur within the next 80 to 100, the next 100 hours. I suspect it will be the announcement that Joe Biden will not fight the next presidential election, that he will stand down and be replaced. I wouldn't be surprised if you're talking about that on Monday morning. And just you wait until you hear who's going to be sitting in this chair next week. I will be teasing you with that, by the way, all day. But I think, given that there is clearly something truly extraordinary happening under our noses in real time, and yet in this country at least, or in this building at least, there is what I would call, perhaps inappropriately, I would call a curiously British response. I nearly said a curiously British sang-froid, but given that sang-froid is I think it means cool blood. Given that that's a French phrase, obviously it's not a curiously British phenomenon because the French are the only ones that have got a phrase to properly describe it. So I was wrong when I called it a peculiarly British response, but you know what I mean. It's like we don't like to make a fuss, do we? I tell you what, old boy, we don't like to make a fuss. I think of the knights in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's just a flesh wound when he's had sort of half his leg chopped off. It's just a flesh wound. We're always a little, and I like it. I think it's a healthy psychological response sometimes not to panic. Now we've got a Dad's Army reference. That's Monty Python, Dad's Army, and a little bit of French. Don't panic. And I'm not panicking, but I suspect we probably should be a bit. Think about that headline just for 1 minute. Mass IT. I know what you're thinking. You think it can't be that bad, James. I can still hear you. Mass IT outage across the world. The thing that caught my eye, right, some things just hit you differently from other things, don't they? A handwritten boarding pass at an Indian airport. So the plane is still going to fly, as far as I can tell. In some corners of the world, planes are not flying. The plane is going to fly, but the computers are not capable of processing the passengers. So they're handwriting boarding passes. That was just something that struck me. It's a little bit like, very, very briefly, what everybody thought was going to happen at the dawn of the millennium. Do you remember that? The millennium bug, which some people still don't understand the importance of. The millennium bug was a thing, and the dangers it would have posed to our society were massively mitigated and assuaged by extremely hard-working IT professionals in the run-up to the dawn of the millennium, so that when it actually dawned, none of the things that could have gone horribly wrong when clocks reset or internal software didn't know how to process the fact that all the zeros were returning to the space that had previously been full of other numbers. That's quite a technical explanation for you there. Apologies if I lost you. That it didn't all go nuts, but if it had all gone nuts, it would have looked a little bit like this. Mass IT outage across the world. So I have enormous faith in my listeners for reasons that become clear almost every day. I'm not going to lie. Some days I feel you really let me down. But mostly I have enormous faith in my listeners. Best demonstrated this week probably by the housing phone-in, would you believe? Not necessarily a obvious topic to create scintillating radio, but my goodness me, we had so many people listening who knew exactly what they were talking about that we were able to come to a much better understanding of what Keir Starmer, what the Labour Party's housing plans might look like, their plausibility, their fitness for purpose, than we ever could have done in speaking to a panel of sort of traditional experts. It was people who were, with their hands dirty, people in the middle of doing stuff that could tell us more in more comprehensible ways. So I'm going to do it today. I'm going to try and keep an eye on my texts, which we will use to just pinpoint things that are happening. My wife works for the largest private jet firm, James. All the planes have been grounded. Can you imagine how much money is being lost? I can't even begin to. My girlfriend just went to get a doctor's appointment, says Liam. They were writing the appointments in a book with a pen. What is this witchcraft of which you speak? Writing things in a book with a pen? I love the idea of somebody somewhere sitting there twirling their moustaches going, I love it. I love it when a plan comes together, because they have refused to move into the digital age. They're sitting at their desk now with their abacus and their quill like Bob Cratchit in the opening scenes of A Christmas Carol, laughing at the rest of us for being so completely reliant on technology. And that is where we're going to start. Airlines are affected. The media is affected. Sky News was just off air this morning. I came into work. We've got a bunch of screens in the newsroom, and Sky News was just a dead screen. There was literally nothing happening. And when they came back, they obviously didn't have the technology in the studio. They were apologising for a fuzzy picture and looking at their phones and pieces of paper. They obviously didn't have auto cue or computer usage. Everything here is fine. Do we know why is everything here fine? Do we know why everything here is fine? Well, I don't. So what I'm going to do is open up the phone lines and ask you what exactly has happened. I want you to. This is cometh the hour, cometh the cometh the Keith, cometh the hour, cometh the geek. What exactly has happened? And I need your explanation to address directly the fact that my local Morrison's is up the spout, but so are airports in India. That's what I need you to I need to understand why Gales in Brentford is currently operating a cash-only policy, and airplanes in China are not taking off, or if they are, they're doing so with passengers who have handwritten boarding passes. That's what I need you to explain. And I think we might. Shall we adopt some of the mystery hour? I mean, there could be a Ray Liotta up for grabs today. I don't know who would get the bloke who pressed the button. The bloke who is currently sitting at work with his head in his hands thinking, I know what I'll do. I'll put James on. He always cheers me up. The single worst day. I like the joke about how's Liz Truss's first day working at Microsoft working out. Has anybody heard from Liz Truss this morning? In the heart of the IT universe. But that would be an all day long Ray Liotta, wouldn't it? Someone who was actually involved. Someone who could tell us from the room where it happened exactly what it is that's happened. There is somebody somewhere. Where would they be? Do we know where they would be? Would they be in Seattle, perhaps? Would they be in Silicon Valley? Could they be in London? They're going to be sitting there now going absolutely bonkers. Someone somewhere took the decision to action this process. And whether or not they could have known what was going to happen, whether or not they should have known what was going to happen, I don't know. You might. I want you to ring me. 0345 6060973. And they slowly realised. I mean, what's the worst day you've ever had? I'm not doing this as a phone-in. I'm just thinking out loud. I've told you before, mine was probably when I had a front-page story running that was just absolute nonsense. I'd completely misunderstood something that a famous person had told me about their television programme, and it ran on the front page. I may have had a small sherry during the interview, which contributed, and my tape recorder broke, so it contributed to me. Well, it didn't break. That sounds like it was an act of God. It just ran out of power because I hadn't got any new batteries in my briefcase. So I did it all from memory, got it completely wrong. They stuck it on the front page, and about midnight, the BBC press officer on the phone to the news desk saying, "What is this story about? It's complete gibberish. This just isn't true at all." Something about the BBC axing the Fast show when Paul Whitehouse had just said to me, I don't understand why it's on BBC Two and not BBC. I mean, I hadn't just got the wrong end of the stick. I'd reinvented the stick with two wrong ends. There was no right end of the stick that I managed somehow to transport onto the front. And that was an awful day. But you know, it was just one print run. They press abort, and by the time the second edition comes out, there's a completely different story on the front page of the newspaper. That's not appalling, is it? But it's pretty scary. Somebody somewhere has had the mother of all bad days. Somebody somewhere has got a dinner party anecdote for the ages. They'll say at some point during the dinner, they'll go, do you remember in 2024? Do you remember that summer, that brief? There was about 3 hot days. We called it summer in 2024. July. Do you remember July 2024? Do you remember when all the computers went doolally? Do you remember when all the computers packed in? And everyone around the table will go, yeah, of course I do. Yeah, we had a terrible time. We couldn't buy any ricicles in Morrison's. And then somebody somewhere will be able to spend the rest of their life sitting back at that point at the table and going, yeah, that was me. That was me, that was. Is it possible? I mean, we can add that question to the mix this morning. Is it possible that one person has pressed one button in one building somewhere in the world and that is responsible for everything that has subsequently happened? Or have you got a better explanation? That's where we'll start. I mean, look, the worst thing that can happen now is we get a really good caller up first, isn't it? And explains it. Then we'll have to talk about something else. We'll have to talk about potholes or something. But I want to know what has happened. I want to know exactly what has happened. I want to know how plausible it is that one person has pressed one key on one computer, in one office, in one building, in one city, in one country, in this world, and everything that has followed on from that has its seeds, has its origins in that single moment with that single person. I don't know why I find that fascinating, but I do. And coming up to 10:15. And then I do want to know what's going on where you are. So whether or not it is the fact that Morrison's is currently unable to process your transactions, or whether it is the fact that there are planes unable to take off, or broadcasters unable to broadcast. Everywhere you turn, extraordinary scenes. I'm looking again at Indian airports in a state of complete disarray. Why have some sectors, some buildings, some organisations been much more badly affected than others? I think I know the answer to that one. It depends on whether or not you use this particular software. But as Stephen says, Stephen gets it. Whoever pressed that button, James, I would love to be at their next one-to-one meeting with their manager. It's time for your annual appraisal. Just come in and sit down. Now, where to begin? It's 10:15. The number you need is 0345 6060 973. 18 minutes after 10, and there is a sort of serious note here as well. I mean, it could turn out to be an incredibly serious. It is incredibly serious, but people aren't taking it that seriously because it's so extraordinary. We just presume it'll all be sorted by lunchtime. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're being incredibly naive. That's one question I would add to the mix. But I'm interested in the fragility of things. Sounds like a poem, that, doesn't it? I'm interested in the fragility of things. I'm very much of the generation that somehow almost thinks of technology in a magical sense. Have very little idea how anything works, but supreme confidence that it will and that it does. Every now and then you have a glitch, or something goes a little bit wrong. But generally, you have supreme confidence that when you press a little button in your sitting room, your television will come on. And of course, these days, your television will come on with like 200 choices of things that you could watch, all of which you will be able to watch with enormous ease. Everything technological. You go to the airport, never crosses your mind that delays and weather aside, the technology will generally be fine. And when it isn't, it feels like a temporary blip. How naive is it to think of technology as being safe and permanent? Is it getting less safe the more sophisticated it becomes? I often think of cars in that context. And if something goes wrong with your car these days, it's likely to be the onboard computer. If something went wrong with your car back in my childhood, it was likely to be your big end or something mechanical. I don't know. I don't know quite how you set that up as a phone-in, but I am quite interested. Is there any alternative to being completely reliant upon technology in this way? A few reports from the front line. James says, complete lack of chaos in Screwfix, James, where the woman behind the counter started shouting that all card payments are down, things will need to be paid for in cash, and all the builders and electricians just whipped out huge wads of notes that I assume come from their off-the-books job. Don't be outrageous. You always need to have a lot of ready cash to hand, James, when you're in the building trade, as I well know from my 2 weeks on a building site in Doncaster in 1988. And I quite like this from Jackie. I'm feeling so smug at the moment with my A5 paper diary that my family always laugh at. Nothing in my day will be affected because LBC is still working, and so is my washing machine. And it's a sunny day. Hashtag winning there from Jackie. 20 after 10 is the time. Tony's in Bushy. Tony, what can you tell us?
Morning, James. Well, I have to say, first things first, I'm very surprised to be talking tech with you and not Middle East conflict or politics, which are...
well, the day is young. Who knows where this conversation will go?
So I've been CTO, Chief Tech Officer of several companies, and I think I've got quite a good insight into this and why it's happening. in a nutshell, Microsoft Windows is the most popular operating system worldwide, and it's been around for decades now. It was never really built with security in mind, and obviously, as time goes by, security threats have become more severe, and there's a whole kind of industry of third parties who have software now to make your Microsoft Windows more secure.
From hackers and viruses and the like.
Correct. Hackers, viruses, ransomware, you name it, right? One of these is called CrowdStrike. Pretty good reputation, if I'm honest. But what has happened here is that CrowdStrike have rolled out an update which has blue screens, i.e. crashed millions of Windows computers worldwide. So a little bit unfortunate on their part. So,
I suspect that I am going to have to play the role of the idiot in these conversations, but it's a challenge to which I'm confident I can rise with aplomb. So the companies that are affected, the companies and the organisations that are affected, have a subscription with CrowdStrike.
Correct. Yes.
Which is probably why we're okay here at Global Towers.
Look, I don't want to say anything about your security posture. That's something that we can take offline. But I would say that it's a little bit unfortunate that it is actually companies who, with sort of goodwill, have invested in security software who are suffering from this.
But there will be companies who've invested in different security software.
Yes,
who are not affected by this.
Yeah, the thing is, as you're saying, CrowdStrike is an extremely large player.
Is it the biggest player in the field? In the set, it looks like it is. NHS is broken now. I'm reading.
Top three.
Top three, okay.
Top three. Yeah.
And that is something that you have. And I'm, as you've probably gathered, I'm not pretending to be an idiot or to be completely ignorant in this field. What was the thing I used to have? McAfee.
Yep.
So is this is like McAfee Turbo?
Similar kind of thing, just a little bit more 2024 and a little bit less 1994. There is, by the way, I should say for anyone who is affected by this, there is a fix.
Already?
Yep. You can go online and you can Google it. So if you have like an Android phone or whatever, or an iOS phone, then that's absolutely fine. It's not affected. Go online. Look for the CrowdStrike fix. It basically involves booting your Windows into safe mode, deleting a file, and you're good to go. And I know that might sound like technobabble, but it's not rocket science. I'm happy to help anyone who is affected. Give them my number, and it's all good.
Oh, bless you.
The big problem.
When will it all be over? When will everything be back to normal?
Well, that's the big problem. You see, most maintenance work can be done remotely, right? So if you're an organisation with thousands, hundreds, tens of thousands of machines, you would roll out your updates remotely. But if your machine can't actually boot up, then you can't do that. So it means that someone somehow has to go around to each individual machine or reinstall them somehow. So there's quite a lot of manual labour involved here.
You're saying that's a possibility or that's a certainty?
I'm saying that, unless anyone's got any more creative solutions, which some people may have, if it was me, I've been on both sides of this, I'd be going around now and sort of, rallying the...
But who's they? Who will be going round now? We've got everything from Morrison's in Brentford to airports in India.
So hopefully all these places have IT support staff on site or people who can be trained extremely quickly to do this fix.
So it could be days?
It could be. I think it depends on the organisation and the amount of...
okay, this is a brilliant start. I think we will have the... I think we'll use all the mystery hour stuff for this hour, won't we? So qualifications, Tony?
CTO, Chief Tech Officer of several companies, currently run my own freelance CTO, CIO practice called Gem Agile.
Well played.
Look us up and happy to help anyone who's suffering from this unfortunate issue.
Well, in the first instance, it's a round of applause. It's not a ray Liotta because you didn't do it. I'm reserving the ray Liotta for whoever it was who pressed the button. Do we get our own IT department up here and talk to them a bit? We don't. I know we obviously don't use the software. Even I've worked that out. But I mean, they might be able to talk to us about what would happen in this building if we did use this software. Well, that might be quite fun. Always like to look after the IT crowd because they know all my secrets. Cam is in Coventry. Cam, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi James. It's sort of trying to explain sort of processes that go on in the background before these sort of updates are released. I mean, I've been working in IT change management now for 10 to 15 years, and it's a massive failure on the processes.
You're not getting any prizes for that observation, Cam. I think we all know it's a massive failure, but I'm teasing you a bit. Tell me more about what has actually happened.
Well, basically what's happened here is we've had developers at CrowdStrike. They've written a release, and that should have gone through numerous processes for quality testing.
And that's what you do?
Yeah.
So what does that involve in your sort of day job, in your day-to-day job? That involves doing things like stress testing, doing things to check there are no circumstances in which things will go wrong.
Yeah, all of that should happen before it comes across my desk, because I run the actual change management. So they will put together a change request, and they'll say we need to update this particular software because of X, Y, and Z. And then there will be a whole load of criteria that they've got to fill in. Things like, have you tested it? Where have you tested it? Have you tested it on different platforms?
So can you conceive of how this has happened then?
For a company like CrowdStrike, I find it incredible that it's actually happened. That it's sort of.
And will it have been, in the context of this upgrade, would it have been at some point in the last 24 hours, is it? One person has pressed one key in one office.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that person who pressed the sort of release or go.
Oh, boy.
Is. But, having said that, it's not going to be his or her fault. It's going to be everybody involved in that process.
How many people would that be?
Somewhere at CrowdStrike could go into the hundreds when it comes into project teams.
And I'm wary of doing anything. I don't think anybody should do anything without speaking personally and directly to experts. Just because experts are ringing in, I'm almost like giving medical advice. But how likely do you think it is that people will be able to fix it themselves? Because we're still getting. I mean, because people are sending me messages saying what you need to do is this. They've released the fix, but if it was that straightforward, then everything will be back to normal by lunchtime. And my sense is that it won't be.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that it's causing what they call a blue screen of death, which basically kills your machine. So if you've not got access to your machine, you're going to need specialist IT techies to turn up and do it. You see. So they may turn up with the patch for the patch on a USB stick, boot up your machine using...
But you'd need it on a USB stick because you can't use your terminal to access it because your terminal is frozen.
Yes.
Wow. Will we ever find out the name of the person who pressed the button? I know, and I appreciate your solidarity that you're saying it's loads and loads of people. It's a bit like blaming... I don't know. Let's try and think of a funny analogy, Cam, together, shall we? What's it like? I'm thinking like 100 people have contributed to something, and then one person presses a button and everything falls apart. And inevitably, all our focus is on that one person, but it's the fault, as you said, of the 100 people who were putting it together in the first place. I suppose it's like the civil servant who actually sort of writes up the legislation, which has had hundreds of people contribute towards it, and they say it's his fault. It's a bit like that, yeah. No, it's. I quite like. I'm looking for something a little bit more cartoonish, really. Do you know what I mean?
Mind you, Trish's lot look quite cartoonish.
Yeah, but it was her fault, though. I think that's the problem there, and I do have to repeat again the best joke on the internet this morning so far. Is does anyone know how Liz Truss's first day at Microsoft is going? Although, as we've already discovered, this is not a Microsoft problem exactly. It's this CrowdStrike company that deals with security, and so I'll give you. I think there's a lot of people who are as ignorant as I am about these matters. So you pay a monthly subscription to a company that essentially takes care of security on your computer and makes sure that bad stuff can't infect your system, whether it's viruses or hackers or any other cyber threats. They are cyber security purveyors. but it means a constant update of the defences, the technological defences that surround your computer system need to be constantly updated because the threats are constantly changing. It's a bit like slugs in the garden, which Tom was talking about at the end of the programme. If, for example, you sprinkle eggshells around your radishes in order to prevent the slugs from nibbling them, then a slug might come along that is resistant, that can actually slither over your eggshells, in which case you'll need to update your security. You'll need to get bigger shards of eggshell, or you'll need to put down copper wire, or you'll need to get wool. And every month, CrowdStrike essentially ring fences the radishes of everything from Morrison's to Indian airports with ever evolving technology. So you're getting more sophisticated, sharper, bigger shards of eggshell being sprinkled constantly around your radishes in the hope that your radishes will never be molested by slugs again. And today, in the context of international global cybersecurity, it's not that the slugs are nibbling the radishes, it's that the sprinkling of the eggshells has somehow temporarily wrecked the whole crop. That's the kind of analogy I was looking for. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 10:33 is the time. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I also want to find out how it's hitting you personally, how it is affecting you directly. And don't hold back. You know, you're thinking, I don't need to phone James. He'll probably know that the skip has just sort of frozen mid-delivery outside my house or outside the building site. What is actually happening? This is very funny. I can't explain it. If you've been paying attention to politics for the last week, you, like me, will appreciate Callum's sense of humour when he writes, James, did you get that analogy from Wes Streeting? Yeah, it's a fair question. So what has happened? How quickly will it be fixed? How will it be fixed? And how is it affecting your world? So I started off with a throwaway line about Morrison's in Brentford not being able to process transactions. But of course, if you extrapolate from that all possible consequences, then you get an inkling of how huge this is. And the question of how long will it last becomes quite urgent. 10:34 is the time. So what's going on? What happens next? And crucially, what is happening in your world? How is it affecting you? So think of that early text from Screwfix. Might sound trivial, but I like assembling huge amounts of trivialities, of apparent I like assembling thousands of small stories to make a big story. So I want you to phone me if you've got a small story, or indeed a big story, or a medium-sized story, or a fair to middling story about what is good. So I've got loads of texts coming in, but I want you to call me. I'm freeing up some phone lines now because I think we've got enough tech experts on the case. I want you to call me and just tell me what's going on where you are. Is Greg's, for example, okay? 0345 6060 973. If you're at the airport, what is actually happening? What are you being told? Are you going to be able to fly today? Are you getting any inkling of how long you're going to be delayed for? What about hotel reservations? You're turning up at a hotel and they've got no way of knowing. How long until the dodgy characters start trying to exploit this situation? How long before people start saying, I've come to pick up my new car. Could I have the keys, please? I jest slightly, but I mean, all of the things that we haven't thought about yet, the unknown unknowns. So we've got the known knowns. We're assembling the known knowns. We're nibbling at the known unknowns. But the unknown unknowns are the things that you can tell us about. What is actually going on where you are? 0345. So, look, this is what we're talking about. Dean's been in touch. He says, I can't log on to Tombola Bingo, James. These are the stories from which we can knit an enormous tapestry of truth. But I need you to provide the individual strands of thread. Rich is in Leatherhead. Rich, what's going on?
Hi, good morning, James.
Hello,
yeah,
Rich.
I just come out of Waitrose, actually, and I had to use cash.
Wow.
That's quite something.
How often do you carry cash?
I don't usually carry cash, but I was pretty lucky. I just thought it was a good idea to put a tenner in the wallet, just in case something happens. And lo and behold, something did happen. But it did remind me of an incident that happened for a company I used to work for. There was a Windows update that knocked out 30,000 workstations within the company overnight.
I mean, if you told me that on any other day, I'd go, whoa. But today I'm going, it's nothing. But not if you're in the company.
It is nothing. The company is quite important in the world, but it is nothing at the time because actually the core IT system for the company, which is sort of ring-fenced away from the rest of the company, which is mainly admin, and training, that was on a separate system. And the computer liaison officer who was supposed to do the Windows update, for whatever reason, went home early, didn't do it. So the core part of the company, which would have a global impact, wasn't done. So he actually didn't do his job.
So it was one person asleep on the job.
Didn't do his job, went home early. And this is and so that particular core part of the company
literally went home early. This isn't a figure of speech. He just clocked off early.
Yeah.
And then at some point that evening, he'd have got a phone call.
Well, yeah, because everyone would have been terrified as to what was happening and people would be working.
But would someone have rung him and said...
They were able to hack into the Windows update, and that's the story that was given, that it was hackers that hacked into the Windows update.
But it wasn't. It was worker error.
Don't know.
Oh, I see. But would he have got a phone call that evening from someone saying, what the hell is going on? And he'd have gone in his head, he'd have realised what he'd done. And oh, my God.
You know what, James,
days.
I think probably because of the impact it would have had if he'd done his job, he probably would have got a promotion.
Oh, right. So he'd failed to spot something as opposed to literally causing something. They're two slightly different things. I understand that. Thank you, Rich. We did this as a phone-in, and I'm not going to lie to you, it didn't quite work. But the reason it didn't quite work at the time, and you won't have noticed, but I would have known in this studio here, because you didn't quite understand what I was trying to convey. I like the way I'm trying to make it sound like your fault, when clearly the failure was in my ability to convey to you what I was trying to convey. But do you remember about 6 months ago, I told you that Mrs. O'Brien, it might be slightly longer, about 6 months ago, Mrs. O'Brien had dropped me off in Hammersmith. And like a genius, I'd left my wallet at home and I'd left my phone, not in Hammersmith, in Ealing. These details matter. I'd left my phone on the dashboard because we'd been using Waze to try and avoid some of the traffic on the way to the station. So I'd left my phone on the dashboard, and I usually have a wallet in my back pocket with cards in it and sometimes a bit of cash. But for some reason, I don't know, I'd changed my trousers or something like that. And I was absolutely stranded. I had just enough money. I think I was 20 pence short, and the lady behind the counter at Ealing Broadway Station let me off 20 pence. And I just found myself thinking, what happens? And that's the other way round. Do you see what I mean? That's like, what happens if you lose your ability to enter the system? I couldn't get to work. And what do? You have to start going up to strangers and ask for money. I came to work and I had to beg money off Eleanor and others. I had to get a tenner here. Henry Riley gave me a 5-0. I mean, the sense I had of paralysis was quite profound. But I failed to convey it to you because it just sounded like some Herbert had left his phone in the car and struggled to get into work. But I was just thinking about how reliant we are. What I didn't do that day is turn it around, like it's turned around today. What happens if the problem is not with the consumer, but with the technology? I think Greg's is all right. Rob the trucker is going to double check for us when he's out and about later. But I'm hearing reports already from Dave's on the A34. He can say, "Can I mark Greg's as safe, please, James?" So Greg's is safe. Greg's is safe. What about MI6? 0345 606 0973. Nigel's in Plymouth. Nigel, what would you like to say?
Hi, I've just been up for a lung scan, just to check, just an age thing, just to check whether I've got cancer or not. I had my lung scan done in 10 minutes, no problems, in a nice car park of a supermarket.
Yes.
And then they weren't able to send it through to the hospital to have it read.
Oh.
So I presumed that the nice lady was going to say, come back tomorrow and we'll redo it or whatever. Can't have it done for another year because of the low level of radiation.
Oh, my days.
Yes.
Oh, well, I mean, A, I hope you're fine, and B, sure you're stressing this is not. I mean, it's just literally a link to age, and there's no particular reason to be worried about it. So I just want to get that in place before I say C. You're a bit of a fun sponge, aren't you, Nigel?
Well, it was a bit funny. I was the first one in, and anyway, as soon as they'd done me and realised they couldn't send it through, they then said to them, "Look, we can't do it," and explained why. But they were so apologetic, and I thought, well, it's one of those things. But
you're a nice man. Some people would have got really exercised by that, but I'm interested that so their computer is incapable of both saving the image of your lung and sending it to HQ.
Correct. Apparently, as the machine does it, it is sent straight through to the hospital where they interpret it and store it. So they have no storage of the information, apparently, at the mobile unit that they do the scans.
Oh, dear, yeah. And it's not waiting lists or staff or management. That it is literally the low levels of radiation that you've got that they can't. It's not. If you were poorly, they'd take the risk of doing more radiation, but because you're not, they won't.
Exactly. As a routine, they wouldn't do it. She said if anything happened, obviously they would take me in and do another CT scan without any problem. But as I'm fit and healthy, otherwise, I don't think that will happen. So I'll wait another year.
Well, fingers crossed. But as you say, I've been very sanguine about it all. Sanguine, there you go. That's the English equivalent of sanctifier. Thank you, Nigel. That is precisely what I was talking about. There is Nigel, producing a lovely strand of silk from which we knit together an enormous tapestry of truth. So you hadn't thought about stuff like that. Ian makes a very valid point, picking up on something that Rich in Leatherhead said a few moments ago. Taking it all a bit too far there, James. Your caller said he bought something in Waitrose for under a tenner. Yeah, right. That's fake news all day long. You have a valid point. It's Tam, I beg your pardon, not Ian. I misread that, but not because of any technological breakdown, just because of the state of my eyes. Emad's in Ealing. Emad or Emad? What would you like to say?
Hello there. Hi, James. Emad or Emad doesn't really matter.
It does. What do you prefer? Of course it matters.
You can call me Emad.
Emad. What would you like to say?
Right. Just wanted to say I'm actually a pharmacist practicing in one of the GP surgeries in West London. Okay. And I literally walked into work today. I was actually underway when I realised there's an outage because a lot of my other colleagues were talking about it.
Yeah.
So we walked in and literally our systems are completely down. The only thing that we can access is a business continuity mode where we can just see the patients booked in with their details and nothing else. So what we had to do was we had to triage all of our patients, bring in the ones that are absolutely urgent and the ones that are not urgent. We had to call them up, cancel the appointments. But one of the biggest issues right now that we have is medication issue because people do run out of their medications. They receive things on a monthly basis. So what we do is we can't even write prescriptions. We can't issue prescriptions. So what we had to do then, we had to ask community pharmacists to step in. So we are asking them to provide emergency supplies based on the information that they hold on their system. But I also understand their system is down, so it has made it very difficult for them as well. So
there's no plan B, is there, really? I mean, you've described there's half a plan B, but in
the medical world, what we do is we try to draw in our professional judgment and clinical judgment to the best we can. If there's any piece of information, apart from the IT information that the patient can provide to us or to the community pharmacy, we'll try to, in the best interest of the patient, we'll try to help them. But essentially, it's a huge work right now. There's a huge shift from GP surgeries to community pharmacies right now as we speak. So I really wanted to commend them for their outstanding performance and invaluable support during this time.
That was very thoughtful of you. Thank you. I just to clarify a couple of things. So all the records are on computers.
Yeah.
And the computers are inaccessible. You can't get to the computers.
Like I said, we have two platforms these are two main platforms which GP surgeries rely on. One is EMIS and the other one is System 1. The one that I personally work with is EMIS and is completely down. The only way to get into the system is the business continuity mode. If you were to think of Windows, you have the actual version and you have the one that is much toned down version.
Oh, okay. And you can still, not everyone will be able to do that. If you've got the blue screen of death, I don't think you can even do that, can you?
No, you can on this one, but you literally can only look at patient's name and that's it.
Right, and you can't contact anyone else. There's no online capability. You're just literally looking at your register almost.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you this question because you're clearly a very responsible and public-spirited person. What's the worst case scenario of what you're telling me?
The worst case scenario is I'm thinking of A&Es and hospitals. I'm not sure if they're affected, and if they are in a much worse place than we are because they literally deal with the most urgent and emergency cases.
We'll hear from them, I'm sure. But in your world, it's all under control. Really, it's suboptimal.
Yes.
But there's not a scenario you can think of that would be particularly catastrophic.
No, we haven't had any cases of that kind yet, and hopefully we won't have it. But essentially, like I said, we had to shift a lot of work to community pharmacy this morning. Okay. So I really feel it for them this morning.
Yes, well, it's very nice of you, and it speaks volumes that you're thinking about others at a time like this when you've got your own work cut out clearly for the rest of the day. 10:47 is the time. So if you're just joining us, we're oscillating between impact and explanation. So Ahmad there giving us impact. Earlier callers, remember you can always rewind Global Radio on the app. Earlier callers giving us explanation of what has happened. Still not entirely clear on what the end game will look like, but there is very bright light at the end of the tunnel. It's just a question of whether or not you will need personnel to arrive at your place of work, and that is now everything from airports in India right through to supermarkets in West London. Whether you will need someone to come in and your own IT department, CrowdStrike of saying the issue has been identified, the issue has been isolated, the fix has been deployed. So it's all a little bit like a sort of film, isn't it, today? I come on air and say, global IT outage. And now, 45 minutes later, I'm saying, issue identified, isolated, and fix deployed. But there's still a lot of unknowables. There's still a lot of unknowns. And, of course, the knowable unknowns, well, that's where we come in. It is 10 to 11, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the question of what on earth happened is close to being answered. The question of what happens next and how long will it take is very much in need of addressing. And the question of how is it impacting you, how is it affecting you, is one which I think we'll continue asking until the fix is complete. If you've got no idea what we're talking about, there's been while you were making a cup of tea or while you were sleeping, there's been a global internet outage. Oh, yeah. Like aircraft's not taking off in India, supermarkets up and down the country not able to operate. And sometimes you get the messages that say things like, well, I don't know what all the fuss is about. I've just been to Lidl. Everything was fine. Some companies have the software. Some companies don't. If you have this software in your system, whether you are an airport in India or a restaurant in Poland, if you have this software in your system, or a pharmacy in West London, if you have this software in your system, you are, to use a technical term, currently screwed. And if you don't, you will be fine. Which is why we're on air, absolutely unaffected. And Sky News was literally taken off air. It was unable to broadcast for quite a lot of time this morning. 10:51 is the time. Harry's in Lakeside. Harry, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Lovely talking to you again. Just want to talk about my wife's experience. She's a internal investigator for Amazon, and she couldn't log on today. And all of her team, there's around about hundreds of people throughout the UK and Ireland, couldn't log on. So many of the crucial works they just couldn't check today.
Gosh. So that just going to mean delays, is it, for purchases?
It's not about purchase, but it's seller. So whoever wants to sell on Amazon can't have their application approved.
Oh, internal investigators. So making sure that the application to open an account is kosher.
That's right, yeah.
Interesting.
So she couldn't do that. None of her team could. But on top of that, you text people texting you, telling you about supermarket and cash. That really, reminds me about China, because I've just came back from a holiday. Because I do lots of YouTube travel videos. I just came back from China.
I remember your YouTube travel videos. They're brilliant.
Oh, thank you, James. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. So in China, it's probably the first cashless country in the world. Everything in China uses either Alipay or WeChat Pay, which is a phone application to make payments. In addition, you can also now scan your face to make payments.
Wow.
So
you can do that here, but you do it on your phone to activate the payment, don't you? You mean in China you can just look at the camera?
Yeah, so It scans you. So your face is linked to your passport and your bank cards. So you don't need phone payments anymore. Just scan your face and that's it.
So I mean, that's kind of scary, and yet at the same time it feels kind of inevitable, doesn't it?
It is. And I just think if something like that went wrong in China, it's not just about supermarkets, it's the
Everywhere.
whole country.
So in fact,
Everywhere.
when I was talking and trying to convey this sort of sense of this profundity I felt when I had no money and no cards on me, in China I'd have been absolutely fine.
Yes, so nobody carries a wallet, everybody carries phone. It's not just about the mobile payment like your Google or Apple wallet. It's a completely different app that you scan a QR code to pay everything. It's quite incredible. It's very convenient, but
until it goes down, it's very convenient until it goes down.
Absolutely, and that was my biggest sort of takeaway from going to China. But also, like I said, in hotels, most hotels in China, they don't have a room delivery anymore. They do everything by robot. So a robot will come to your room to deliver. Yeah, it's on my video, James. But you can check it out.
Go on. What's the YouTube channel called? Is it
Global Hopper? On YouTube. It's called Global Hopper. Yeah.
Global Hopper.
Yeah,
and I'm going to have a look now. Don't go away. This is amazing radio. They love all the... God, crikey, yeah. So, you really are. And this was your first time in Guangzhou, was it?
Guangzhou, yeah. Shenzhen is crazy, James, because we were walking in the park and we got thirsty. And what we do is, instead of finding a cafe, all we do is just order a drink or food via drone. So you do it on your phone.
Shut up.
No, seriously, it's on my video. Have a look.
I'm looking now, and that is on the Guangzhou video, is it?
No, it's in Shenzhen.
Okay, let me find that. So I'll find it in a minute. So you literally standing in a park and order a drink to be delivered by drone.
Drone will come to you, a Starbucks or a KFC or whatever drink that you want. It will deliver within 10 minutes, and you can just drink. And bear in mind, James, Shenzhen is a city. It's a highest tech city. So all the high tech stuff coming out of China. You think about BYD. You think about TikTok. You think about Neo. You think about all the high tech stuff. It all came from Shenzhen. And what's amazing about that is Shenzhen did not exist 40 years ago.
And
it was a fishing village.
This is incredible, isn't it? I'm just looking at it now, and when you go into the centre business district, and really, that's all big. Because the same is true of Dubai, isn't it? It was a tiny little fishing village, and then suddenly it exploded upwards and looks as if it's been there forever. But I'm just looking at how many subscribers you've got. I'm going to get you to at least 1.72 thousand, is it?
Yeah, 1.7 thousand.
Well, we'll get you up to 2. I reckon, by close of play today. Get yourself on YouTube, get onto Global Hopper and have a look at the future. I don't know how this has happened from a conversation about the global internet outage. We're plugging your YouTube channel. You're a marketing genius. How have you done this? I feel like I've been hypnotised. I feel like one of those people who's had their watch taken off while they've been talking to somebody without even... Why am I plugging your YouTube channel? Why you're not plugging mine?
No, James, I love for you to actually visit China. I love for you to see it because it's not... what people think it is incredibly high tech. And bear this in mind. I did a guide to China, but people are friendly. It's not what you think.
Oh, I'm sure.
I know
the difference between the population and the government is like everywhere else, isn't it? Absolutely. I would love to visit, and by the time I've watched all your videos, I'll know exactly where to go and what to do. Harry, or Global Hopper, as we will always know him, at Global Hopper 2131. Amazing scenes. I didn't even know that. I'm still a little bit confused about how that happened. Can I just plug my own YouTube channel quickly, just to sort of restore equilibrium in the universe? You can watch all of our... or you can watch the real things that happen on the programme, as opposed to fake videos that have drawn a little bit of attention this week from, racists mostly. So you can watch all of my shows entirely, in their entirety on YouTube. Hey, YouTubers, don't forget to ring that bell, ding, ding, ding. And that is the future. 10:58 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Neil is in Felixstowe. Neil, what can you tell us?
Hi, James. Nice to speak to you.
Likewise.
I work for a haulage firm in Felixstowe, in and out of the docks for containers. And right now, the port is shut down.
Completely shut down. And we're sure this is the global internet outage and not Brexit.
It is, it is because they all run on like VBS numbers that print out. That gives you your bay location, what crane to go to, get your box in and out ports, and obviously that's loading up the ships as well. So
the ships can't leave. The ships can't leave.
No.
The lorries can't dock. Can't get in or out, and the queue just grows.
And it is, it's a lorry park at the minute. And
it's going to get bigger and bigger. I mean, there's going to be lorries arriving now while you're speaking, and they're going to be at the back of the queue.
I'm watching lorries just going round and round the inside of a roundabout and out again because there's just nowhere to go. And the queue,
what are you going to do?
I believe now, is just backing up the A14. So yeah, because it's you got to come right to the end of the A14 to get into Felixstowe, and it's
I suppose that if there's anything, the Daily Mail are going to struggle to blame this on Keir Starmer, aren't they? Given that it's happening absolutely everywhere in the world. But what are you personally going to do? What are you going to do?
I've just got to sit tight. That's all I can do. I'm not getting an early Friday at this point.
No.
Thankfully the aircon works well.
That's nice. Are you all right for sandwiches? You got a bit of scram?
I'm all right for sandwiches.
Well, if you need a wee, what will you do if you need a... Don't be too graphic. This is a family programme. But are you near the facilities?
There is a pub opposite me.
Right.
I could, shimmy over there.
That's all right. Well, I tell you what, give it a shout. Give it a shout. And then if you're really desperate, you can tell them you've just given them a free advert on the most listened to talk show in the whole of commercial radio.
Yeah. It's the Dooley pub.
There we go. Look at that.
The Dooley pub.
The Dooley pub, just outside Felixstowe, or just inside Felixstowe.
Just inside, yeah.
Stay safe, Neil.
So, nice to speak to you, James.
Always.
Take care.
And you. It's 11 o'clock. 3 minutes after 11 is the time, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I suppose there were some fears that the electoral wipeout suffered by the Conservative Party might deprive the right-wing newspapers of half-wits to ring up in search of a quote whenever something that they neither understand nor care about appears in the news. Happily, there's one called Greg Smith, me neither, who's told the Daily Mail that Just Stop Oil protesters jailed yesterday are apologists who need to think about the lives harmed and actual losses caused as a result of these actions and get on the side of the British public, not Tarquin and Delilah at Just Stop Oil. And who wouldn't listen to Tory MP Greg Smith instead of Sir David King, the government's former chief scientific advisor, who said yesterday, or in a statement read outside the court, said, "This is so disgraceful. We are all hoping that the change in UK government will also change the situation in our courts." And it is in response to a verdict which has seen 5 Just Stop Oil activists being handed record terms, the longest ever sentence for a peaceful protest. And I do think that the use of that word peaceful is important. And the response from supporters of Just Stop Oil has been, as you would expect, outraged and deeply upset. So the protests in the evidence, so they've been found guilty of conspiring to cause a public nuisance. So they're kind of being done for planning events that were widely reported at the time, including protesters climbing onto gantries over the motorway for 4 successive days in November 2022. The actual protesters themselves, of course, have already been jailed. 45 activists involved in total, and the economic hit is estimated to be £765,000. The cost of the Metropolitan Police was more than £1.1 million, and the estimated delays, which is quite an interesting conversation given what we just heard from Lowestoft, sort of good delays and bad delays. The Tory government responsible for all sorts of delays as a consequence of its ludicrous Brexit, but Just Stop Oil protesters responsible for an estimated 50,000 hours of vehicle delays, affecting more than 700,000 vehicles. This is the claim. The M25 compromised for more than 120 hours. The problem with the rhetoric of people like Greg Smith MP is that the people who've been jailed are not the types of people to fit the cliches. I don't know how old you are, but I guess it's always tempting to think of Swampy at this point. Swampy was the sort of original eco-activist, or at least the first one to really garner the attention of the British public, because he was attempting to stop road building by digging big tunnels under the targeted area and refusing to come out. In retrospect, that's really brave, especially if you're claustrophobic. But at the time, I mean, I was very much closer to the Daily Mail's position back then than I am now. And at the time, I just thought, not lazy, but troublemaking do-gooders or whatever the phrase at the time was. I think I used to talk about patchouli oil a lot. Do you know what patchouli oil is? I think I used to talk about patchouli oil a lot when we were talking about eco-activists. But people like Swampy were canaries down the coal mine, and they've now been followed by I mean, look, a 58-year-old woman, Louise Lancaster, a doctor, a PhD, Lucia Whitaker de Abreu, Daniel Shaw's 38, Roger Hallam, the co-founder of Just Stop Oil, a 58-year-old man. These are, and a 22-year-old woman called Cressida Gethin. So the 5 names, Roger Hallam, Cressida Gethin, Daniel Shaw, Lucia Whitaker de Abreu, and Louise Lancaster. These are people motivated by a profound concern, an irresistible concern, an unignorable concern about climate change. But, and it's 5 years for Roger Hallam, 4 years for the rest of them. Of course, they'll be out in much less than that. Possibly, if the prisons crisis isn't solved or at least ameliorated sometime soon, they'll be out after serving about 40% of their sentence. But that's not the point. It's a peaceful protest designed to stop the traffic, literally. Figure of speech that. And here's the thing, all right? I am persuaded, and it shouldn't sound surprising to anybody, but there are still a lot of idiots out there, of course. I am persuaded that the climate change crisis is existential, absolutely extraordinary. And I'm also very conscious of the curious human reaction, which I touched upon at the beginning of the last hour. We hear about this international IT outage, not an internet outage. God, I can't imagine anyone would have called it that. The international IT outage. I called it that. And that was a mistake because, of course, you now use the internet to send the fix to everybody who needs to sort their IT out. So it's an international IT outage. I'm conscious of 3 things. I'm conscious of intellectually appreciating the scale of the emergency, but emotionally not doing enough. I'm emotionally not doing enough. This isn't about me, by the way. I'm just getting my ducks in a row before I give you the question that I want you to answer. I'm conscious of the fact that we in the media, whether we are broadly sympathetic to Just Stop Oil's cause or not, and if you're not, you really need to give your head a wobble. You don't need to approve of the tactics. We're getting to that. But you really, really, really need to understand the cause, unless, of course, you've been on your Uncle Keith's Facebook page and you're convinced not only that aeroplanes are seeding the planet with secret chemicals, but also that there's no such thing as climate change, and the World Economic Forum is trying to imprison us all in cells made of spam. I get that. So I'm sympathetic to their cause. And I understand the failure to garner the sort of attention that they feel they need. And it is that failure, in which we're all complicit, that prompts the behaviours for which they have now been sentenced. It is the failure of peaceful protest that does not disrupt that propels them into places of disruption. So stuff I find ridiculous, just for the record, is lobbing orange powder on a snooker table at the Crucible in Sheffield. I know it gets coverage, but it will get less coverage. Attacking Stonehenge, I found that ridiculous at 10 o'clock in the morning. By 11 o'clock, I'd kind of come round a bit because of that dichotomy, because of that tension between action and attention. If you really want to draw attention to your cause, you've got to do something that is attention-grabbing. And standing outside the Department of Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs for the rest of your life with a placard, or going even on hunger strike outside the Department of Environment and Rural Affairs, is not going to work. It is not going to get me or other LBC presenters to talk properly about your cause if you do all of the things that you're allowed to do. So instead, you do the things that you're not allowed to do. And that includes disrupting traffic. That is what they're going to jail for a total of just shy of 21 years in total. As I say, they won't serve that. But humanity is quite easy to argue. Humanity is currently doomed. And these people disrupted traffic. And they're going to jail for 21 years. So I want you to come at it from that tension there. You know it is easy, and there may well be examples of this happening, but generally speaking, it's a rhetorical device deployed by the intellectually lazy and the morally bankrupt. So you say something like, "Oh, what about all the ambulances that couldn't get through?" And then you never mention things like that on days like the coronation, when the entire capital city is brought to a complete standstill, or the late Queen's funeral, where the roads near me were absolutely shut, completely shut, so that the cortege could make its way to Windsor. So, there is some validity in it, but it is deeply disingenuous to pretend that you're not comfortable with shutting down huge swathes of the nation's infrastructure for things like, crownings of kings. You need to do something significant to draw the attention that the emergency demands. But there's still a sense, isn't there, among people who... I tell you what I think this story will have done. I think this story will have got some people who aren't massively sympathetic with Just Stop Oil or their tactics, concluding that the sentence is excessive. The sentence is excessive. And equally, I think you'll have people who are supportive of Just Stop Oil, who are supportive of both their tactics and their actions, who recognise that the job of the judiciary here is to stop them from doing it again. It is pour encourager les autres. It is literally designed, this sentencing, to stop the next generation or the next phalanx of Just Stop Oil activists from stopping the traffic, from bringing the M25 to a standstill, or sending people up gantries to stop the, what would you call it, to stop the social and economic blood from being pumped around the body politic. That is what they set out to do. And it worked. And that is why the full weight of the law has come down upon them like a ton of bricks. But it's peaceful. There's events in Harehill, just outside Leeds overnight, that are anything but peaceful. It reminds me, if you haven't seen the footage, of when the police van was set on fire outside an asylum centre by racist protesters. A Romanian, I think a Romanian Christian child, but they were trying to take into social service care, and the local community reacted incredibly violently to the point of tipping over a police car. Just a message for anyone who needs to hear this: you condemn both. It doesn't matter what the context is, or the identity or the background of the culprits. If people are attacking police vehicles, they are bang out of order. You don't base your reaction to this on whether or not they're football hooligans or I don't know, anti-immigration protesters. They're all scumbags, okay? Whether you're attacking a police car in Leeds because their social services are trying to do their job, or whether you're attacking a police car in Kent because immigration services are trying to do their job. You don't tailor, unless you're a massive racist, of course, and there's a lot of that on social media this morning. But you don't base your response to actions upon the ethnicity or what you perceive to be, or what you're being told by racist agitators the religion of the actors may be. 11:15 is the time. I just want to make that clear. But, there will be people involved in those protests who don't go to jail at all. There are people currently not going to jail. There was one case, and I can't find the detail. I really wanted to set it up for you in juxtaposition to this story, of a man who attacked his girlfriend, threatened to kill her, stabbed her, inflicted terrible, grievous harm upon her, and the judge has said in court that the likelihood of a custodial sentence is diminished by the state of the justice system, by the state of our prisons. So they're releasing violent prisoners early to free up room in a prison system that is now going to contain 5 adults who are going to jail for peacefully protesting against the government's failure to properly address climate change. Now, listen, I know how knee-jerk reactions work. I know, it's outrageous. They should be locked up for even longer. I get it, but be kinder to yourself this morning. Just be a little bit kinder to yourself. Allow your imagination to grow into a space that is not defined and very tightly controlled by right-wing rhetoric, by lazy, morally bankrupt right-wing rhetoric. Who do I get to kick today? You've ended up asking yourself every morning. Is it the immigrants? No, we're taking a day off from the immigrants. We're going after the eco-zealots or whatever we could. Just be kinder to yourself. Give yourself enough space in your mind to actually wonder what a country is becoming when they are releasing violent criminals early in order to make room for peaceful protesters. And also, I don't know how much attention you paid yesterday to the COVID inquiry, to the original findings of the COVID inquiry, but you will probably have picked up on the fact that the early findings show that had the government been better prepared, goodness knows how many people might still be alive. So what we have today is a situation where a citizen, an ordinary citizen of these islands, who is trying to prevent unnecessary deaths by planning peaceful climate protests, gets sent to prison for 5 years, whereas a former prime minister who literally caused countless unnecessary deaths by transferring resources from pandemic response to preparation for his own lunatic no-deal Brexit, as things stand, gets no punishment at all. So you go to prison for trying to stop people from dying unnecessarily, but you don't go to prison for hurting people. Or, in the case of politicians responsible for our paltry pre-pandemic preparation, contributing to people's deaths. So what do we think? 0345 6060 973. The tactics, I don't know that they work. I really don't know that people who are a little bit sceptical or ambivalent watch the Just Stop Oil protest and think, yeah, they're right, I'm joining. I don't know. I don't like not knowing. Some days I like not knowing. I like coming on air and admitting to you that I don't know which way to jump. I don't know which way to go. But that's different. That's when there are two directions. I don't know about this story. The job of the government, the job of the judiciary, forgive me, the job of the authorities is to ensure that this stuff doesn't happen. And in order to do that, the sentences need to be really severe. It has to be severe enough to put people off doing the same thing next year. But I don't think that will work. I think it's like breaking a butterfly on a wheel. If you're motivated by existential angst about the future of the species, then you're not going to be put off by 4 years in jail any more than Nelson Mandela was put off the path that he chose to follow by a much longer period of imprisonment. So I don't know. And that's where we go with this question. 0345 6060 973. What do you think of these sentences? What do you think of them? Will it work? Will it work as a deterrent? Or is it actually quite a dark day for our democracy when peaceful protesters can be sent to prison for longer than violent criminals? 0345 6060 973. It's 21 minutes after 11. Some breaking news for you this morning. My colleague Lewis Goodall reports that the Foreign Secretary David Lammy has said that the UK government is going to restore funding to the UN aid agency in Gaza. That's UNRWA. And when we were talking about what Labour can do to mark measurable difference in policy towards the continuing carnage in Gaza, that was very much one of the things on the list. It was the former ambassador to Jordan, wasn't it, who rang in with a list of achievable goals that would speak to improvement on the Tory position. I mean, I think don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good sounds a little inadequate in these circumstances, but that is apparently underway as we speak. The courts correspondent for the Evening Standard tweeted yesterday evening, and I really noticed it. It was the first thing this morning, actually, and I really noticed this because I was reading about the jailing of Just Stop Oil protesters for the crime of, wait for it, conspiring to block traffic. I was reading about it at the same time. The courts correspondent for the Evening Standard tweeted, yesterday, a man who threatened to kill a woman, punched and slashed her with a knife repeatedly, got a suspended prison sentence. The judge cited prisons being full and 3 years of court delays as part of the reason for not sending him to jail. This is the last government's legacy in criminal justice. And yet, in the same space, on the same day, 5 people were sent to jail for 5 years and 4 years respectively, for the crime of conspiring to disrupt traffic. And I suppose, if you think that you can, I wonder whether you can make sense of this. Mark's in Romford to kick things off. Mark, what would you like to say?
Good morning.
Hello.
I agree with everything you said. I think it's appalling that these people have been sent to prison.
Just to qualify what it is obviously appalling, but if you move the prioritisation of prevention front and centre, the key role of the authorities here, up to and including the judiciary, is to stop it from happening again, then at least a slim slither of sense perhaps moves into the space, Mark. I don't know, maybe.
Well, the point is, people who are really, really believe in the cause and are really committed to it, there's nothing you can do to them to stop them. They will still carry on. If somebody is truly committed, I mean, history proves that. Look at the suffragettes, look at millions of other causes over the years. If a group of people are truly committed to a cause, they will carry on. Putting a few of their mates in prison for a few years is not going to stop them. If anything, you've now poured petrol on the fire. You've made them even more furious.
And the word martyrdom springs to mind as well.
Yeah, I know. But, at the end of the day, they'll be out in a couple of years, but it's just ridiculous. You've just spent the whole of last week, you and every other radio station, talking about how crowded our jails are.
Yeah.
And then, 2-3 days later, we're sticking 5 people in prison for this. We must be bonkers.
Well, is that a valid compact?
We've got no space in jail.
No, I know. I've made that point. I'm just wondering if is it a valid response to
No, it's not. This is just balmy. At the end of the day, I was saying to your colleague, the researcher, whoever answered the call, whatever.
Producer.
Yeah. Once upon a time, 2-3 years ago, I can't remember, they jumped on all the tube trains at Canning Town and that. I was somewhere up the line, got delayed, I got to work late. So what? Okay, it was a minor incident. The company continued. The world's carried on. We all were inconvenienced, but so what? It's not a terrible thing. I know it's
so they set out. How can we garner? Massive. Hang on a sec. Let me just say this. I don't think I disagree with you about anything, but I'm trying to sort of see it from their point of view.
Yeah.
And they're saying, how can we secure huge amounts of attention? Well, we have to do something that has an enormous impact. How can we do it without hurting anyone materially? We might cause some economic harm, but we're not going to hurt anybody materially. It's hard to think of a better protest than this, but it is still illegal. So what are they supposed to do? What are the police supposed to do?
You punish them like you punish anybody else. This has just been used. They've made an example of these people. They're trying to use this as a deterrent.
And part of your logic is that it won't work. But equally, you can't let them go out and do it every day and not face sanction because there are plenty of people behind them waiting to take up the mantle. It's a weird one. Thank you, Mark. I like that notion of having been inconvenienced by it, but not thinking that even matters a jot in the greater scheme of things. I mean, I don't know that we'll have time for this, and the phone lines are full already, but does it work? In the sense that are we now more conscious? It's not a question of necessarily being more supportive of the tactics, but are we more conscious of the cause? Do they prompt people to actually look into the science, to tear themselves away from their Uncle Keith's Facebook page and weird Daily Telegraph editorials and Tufton Street shilling, and actually listen to what the scientists have to say and respond accordingly? I just don't know, actually. Mark's in Tamworth. Mark, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. I just wanted to bring up the absurdity in parity of offending between what's happened to the protesters and their sentence and what happens to somebody who will knowingly, through an action, i.e. committing a road traffic offence on a motorway. The reason I know this is I was a motorway bobby for years.
I remember, we've spoken about this before.
Yeah. So you could go out in your car, I'm not saying that you will, James, use your mobile phone, hit the back of another car, cause serious injury to yourself or another person, shut that motorway for several hours while the incident is fully investigated, okay? Yeah. With all the same knock-ons of closing the motorway for the Just Stop Oil process. Now, the protesters for Just Stop Oil knew what the potential consequences would be of closing the motorway, as does somebody who's using their mobile phone or speeding or drink driving or just not paying attention if they have a collision. So you've got two sets of offenders that are committing offences knowingly, deliberately, knowing the consequences. You Just Stop Oil protesters go to prison for 5 years. Your person who's driving the motor vehicle can get anywhere between 3 points. And even if they killed somebody and it's deemed to be a death by due care, they might just get a 6-month suspended sentence. The actual economic effects and all the knockback for all those people accused of traffic is just exactly the same. So it is happening every day with
this has really got under your skin, hasn't it?
Well, for years, I was saying these people that commit offences on the motorway through driving when they commit, driving offences on purpose. I suppose
it's not apples with apples, because the person who's using their phone when they're driving or committing another offence and then causes an incident, whether it's fatal or not, that they didn't deliberately set out to do that. So it's not quite like with like, is it? Whereas the protesters,
but they know the consequences. It's like the Just Stop Oil protesters don't deliberately set out to stop somebody getting medical treatment or stop somebody getting to their funeral, or they don't go out to say, right, we're going to cause £750,000 of damage to the local economy. In the same way, but they know the potential consequences of what they're doing. In the same way, the person who's driving the car and commit the offence, they know the potential consequences of what they're doing, because that's why it's against the law. They know the risk involved and everything like that. But for years, I was arguing for the person who commits the driving offence and causes or the knock-on, they should in some way be held accountable for what happens to everybody else. I've been there in the queues of traffic when they're closed.
That's really, really interesting. So the person who causes a road traffic, we shouldn't really be using the word accident even, should we, in some ways?
No, collision. No,
collision.
Exactly,
but they cause a collision.
I've seen
an actual collision which endangers the lives of other people, and you don't get held responsible for the disruption that ensues.
No, and I've closed motorways, registered motorways for collisions, and then what happens is they queue up, and then somebody sitting in the queue has a medical emergency, and the ambulance can't get to them because of congestion, and you're fighting to save their lives in exactly the same way. And it's only happened because somebody else has committed an offence. Now, I'm not saying that the law's the law. We look at it as an ex-bobby. The legislation's there; it has to be adhered to. But the imperative between the two, considering it happens every day, is just farcical. It just seems absolutely bizarre, especially when the prisons are so full. We were arguing for tougher sentences to prevent it happening from the road traffic front every day. For just, for this to start happening now with the Just Stop Oil, protesters, just absolutely just like ridicule. It's just.
And I mean, this will be probably on the say-so of the individual judge, won't it? The decision, the level of sentencing, and some of the comments that he's made sound a little, close to personal animus. I'm sure they're not, but as you say, with all of those other factors in place, both the context you provide about what happens if people who've committed what are outwardly much more heinous or egregious acts on motorways and caused enormous disruption don't get held responsible for the disruption, and yet he's gone in super hard on this.
Yeah, I do feel sorry for the people that have to deal with legislation. As somebody who had to deal with legislation, I mean, just before I finished on the motorway and retired, I was one of the officers that was trained up to try and get people's faces off motorways if they're superglued into them, And so you literally, the demand that comes from it is very high, and you start thinking, I've got better things to be doing than this, on a daily basis. I could actually be out there saving lives instead of dealing with this. But you have to work within the legislative framework that you're given, and that's your job. So I do feel sorry for the judiciary, having to, they're basically shoehorned into it by government, aren't they, by the last government?
Well, but that's the problem, isn't it? And Labour voted against that bill, of course, and so that policing bill that introduced the new powers to jail activists like this. As you say, the judge is, in one sense, only working with what has been handed to him, but in another sense, there probably is a case to be answered about the decision that he has made personally, and we'll move on to that later. Mark, what an amazing perspective to come in as a traffic officer, a former traffic officer, and see it in ways that the rest of us would simply not be able to. Thank you. It's 11:32. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. It's 11:36. So I think this is relevant. You will now see some pressure being brought to bear upon the Attorney General, I think, to review the sentencing of these 5 Just Stop Oil activists sentenced to 5 years in one case and 4 years in 4 cases for the heinous crime of conspiring to block traffic. You will see pressure brought to bear on the Attorney General. And, of course, we know of cases where the original sentence has been deemed to be too lenient or too harsh, and the Attorney General has intervened to adjust the sentence, in this case the longest for a non-violent protest in living memory. Apropos nothing in particular, I'd like to tell you about a case, a completely different case from earlier this year, in which the original sentence handed down by a judge was indeed revisited by the Solicitor General and referred to the case, referred to the Court of Appeal for being unduly lenient. It was a case involving a police officer who was handed a suspended sentence. There may be a little bit of a trigger warning here. It involved crimes of a sexual nature. A police officer was handed a suspended sentence for sexual contact with a drunk woman in his patrol car. And the judge at the hearing, it was a particularly unpleasant case involving an officer who later died, and shortly before he died, recorded an interview in which he identified the colleague who he had been with when they both had sexual contact with a drunk woman in their patrol car, having stopped to offer her a lift home in Chesterfield years previously, in October of 2015. And during the original suspended sentencing, so the decision not to send this police officer, Matthew Longmate, to jail, the judge in that case said that although his actions amounted to a very grave betrayal of trust and had left the woman humiliated, but he said he did not want to send him to jail in order to, and I quote, bring this sad and sorry tale to its end with a final act of mercy. So a police officer who took advantage of a drunk woman in a police car while on duty was spared jail because the judge in that case did not want, and I quote, to bring this sad and sorry tale to its end, or rather he did want to bring this sad and sorry tale to its end with a final act of mercy. So no jail for Matthew Longmate. When it went back to the appeal court, the description of the Court of Appeal's decision hinged upon claims that the former officer's abuse of his position for sexual gain was sickening. And they decided at the Court of Appeal to jail him for 11 months, saying his extended sentence sends a clear message that there are serious consequences for those who carry out misconduct in a public office. So the judge originally decided not to jail a man, a police officer, for sexual contact with a drunk woman in his patrol car. The case was referred to the Court of Appeal by the Solicitor General, and the original sentence was quashed in April of this year. And Matthew Longmate was jailed. He's since been dismissed, as you would hope, by Derbyshire Police, but he has since been jailed. And following the Court of Appeal's decision to jail him, the Solicitor General at the time, Robert Courts, KC, said his abusive position for sexual gain was sickening. His extended sentence sends a clear message that there are serious consequences for those who carry out misconduct in public office. Now, why am I telling you about this? Producer's looking at me as if I've taken leave of my senses. Same judge. Same judge. Police officer pulls up alongside a visibly drunk woman in Chesterfield, offers her a lift home and has sexual contact with her. I'm not going to jail him as a final act of mercy to bring this sad and sorry tale to its end with a final act of mercy. 5 people plan protests, peaceful protests designed to stop traffic on the M25. 5 years, 4 years, 4 years, 4 years, 4 years. Same judge. Just putting it out there. Koye is in Liverpool. Koye, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, I think as a society, it's getting a bit dangerous for us to just stand back and watch protesters that we might not agree with their tactics, but what they're protesting against might actually be something we all have to draw attention to. So a personal story of mine, my partner, under the hostile environment, my partner was to be deported.
Gosh.
In 2017. We didn't know where she was, no contact. My son is autistic. We had no contact with her for about 3 months. And we just got a call from her on the day she was to be deported from Stansted Airport.
Because she'd been in custody for 3 months.
Yeah, she's been in custody from 3 months away from our disabled son. And we just don't know what happened. It was like a miracle to us when this group of protesters broke into the Stansted Airport. Obviously, what they were doing, it's quite wrong, we would say. But they stopped that flight. They called the Stansted 15. And
yes, I remember.
That gave us an opportunity to go back to court. And the judge actually ruled that the Home Office was acting unlawfully by attempting to deport my wife. And those 15 young people were prosecuted under the counter-terror legislation.
Wow.
And one judge actually upheld and said, yeah, they should go to jail for terrorism. and they fortunately were able to appeal that case. And the other judge in the upper tribunal, because I followed it all up, I was following them because I was really anxious for them.
I bet you
and
were.
The judge said that there was actually no case to answer, and it was wrong for whether it was the Home Office or someone trying to prosecute them for terrorism.
There's so much going on here, isn't there? It's hard to think of a better example of the necessity of remembering that judgments, laws, and judges are all human. They're not kind of handed down from on high like the tablets to Moses in the Old Testament. So to clarify, if that flight had taken off, your family would be fractured forever.
My family would be separated. I don't know, because in the judgment, the judge said the harm it would do to my son hasn't been considered. Breaking up an autistic child who couldn't speak verbally from his mom. Yeah. Was just so, said it was unduly harsh.
Who was Home Secretary at the time?
Man, my brain was frozen. Theresa May or President after Theresa May, one of them. But I knew it was the hostile environment, all that area, 2017.
She was Prime Minister by then, so it was probably Priti Patel in the Home. But either way, there was such a long list of them, wasn't there? And then when it got to court, when due process was actually followed, that it was decided that she was entitled to stay, that she should stay in the country.
Yes.
By a British judge in a British court, for people who like to use phrases like that without
thank the Lord for British judges.
Thank the Lord for British judges. And the protesters, whose actions, although illegal, were entirely responsible for allowing your wife to enjoy the protection of the law, ended up being prosecuted themselves.
Yes.
Which is probably inevitable, because you can't have people waiting onto the runway at Stansted for any reasons whatsoever. So I think what you do is you remind us both of the complications in these cases and of the moral dimension that the law is supposed to protect.
Exactly.
Wow.
So it's a tricky mindset, but I think as a British society, it's got a long history of people actually forcing a change on their government, and those changes have been positive. Even though the tactics they used are something we might not agree with.
Yeah.
So
you're right. And peaceful protest, of course, arguably what you're describing wasn't a peaceful protest. It was a lot more disruptive than just sitting in a road. But there's so many phrases that resonate in today's conversation and so many stories. But that one, Koye, that one will stay with me for a long time. If it wasn't for the people that the right-wing media routinely encourages us to malign and despise, then a young autistic boy would have been wrenched from his mother in circumstances that a British judge later concluded to be illegal. And Theresa May was supposed to be the nice one. 11:47 is the time. So I've got the features of the evidence relied upon by the judge in this case to impose what he has described as exemplary sentences. In other words, pour discourager les autres. This is massively the deterrent element. That's what, exemplary sentences. And I wonder whether, when I've read it all out in its entirety, whether any minds will change, particularly with Oye's story resonating in our memories. So the evidence that he used to justify the exemplary sentences, or the longest sentences for a peaceful protest in living memory, included people missed flights, people missed funerals, some students were late for their mock exams, a child with special needs on his way to school missed part of the school day and his medication, which placed the taxi driver driving him there at risk, as the child could have become volatile without his medication. Some other school students with special educational needs were also delayed on their way to school. Somebody suffering an aggressive form of cancer missed an appointment at a cancer clinic and had to wait 2 months for a further appointment. People who were late for work had to work extra hours without pay to make up the time. An HGV driver was unable to deliver £5,000 worth of food to a hospital. And then the judge adds, perhaps ironically, given the causes you espouse, an individual invited to answer questions at the House of Lords before the all-party parliamentary group for water was unable to attend the meeting and incurred wasted expenses. So those are the examples given in defence of or support of the decision to jail 5 people for 5 years in one case and 4 in 4 cases. And I think it's important to get that in front of you as well as we continue the conversation about what is and what is not appropriate. But the comparisons, whether it's from a former motorway traffic officer or whether it's from someone whose wife was nearly deported, or whether it's the case of the police officer that the same judge elected not to jail, but the appeal court later decided should be banged up immediately. It's surprisingly nuanced, isn't it? James is in Exeter. James, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. Good morning.
Hello, mate.
I was imprisoned in 2021 for a year for peaceful protest. And at the time, the judge was clear that he was wanting to make an example of me. So, in other words, creating a deterrent.
Yes.
So my 1 year in Wandsworth was followed then by Marcus and Morgan receiving 2 years, 7 months and 3 months respectively. So now we're looking at 4 and 5 year sentences for Roger and the others who were imprisoned yesterday. The level of support that I received in prison was phenomenal. I mean, 2,000 items of correspondence in a period of 8 weeks. There was a group of supporters outside the prison every single night. I am not convinced that these sentences serve as the deterrent that they're intended to be.
Talk to me about yourself. I mean, literally. Because has it deterred you from the cause?
Absolutely not deterred from the cause.
You're the chap who climbed onto the plane at City Airport.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So can I tell people who you are?
Yeah, sure.
James Brown, not that one, but the other one. Businessman, and also James, a Paralympian. So again, this idea that you're all sort of late issue swampies or something like that is just ridiculous, isn't it? And that you were jailed for a year. I read a very moving letter, I think, that your cousin wrote, didn't she, to the Guardian newspaper, and the very simple question is, did it put you off? Did it suddenly make you care less about the climate crisis or be determined to deploy different tactics in the future?
It didn't make me care any less. It didn't put me off. Obviously, I don't want to go back to prison again, but I believe there are many, many others in the movement who are inspired and who won't be put off. And I think we've seen, I mean, if you just have to look at it from an evidential point of view, just look at the escalation of these sentences. And
this is the point, isn't it? Is that your sentence was supposed to put off other people, but then, of course, and you were Extinction Rebellion, I think, rather than Just Stop Oil.
Correct.
But the principle is exactly the same. If sentencing you for a year had worked, there would have been no need yesterday to sentence Roger Hallam for 5 years. To which I suppose a reactionary responds by saying, well, 10 years then, or 15 or 20. Eventually, we'll find the sentence that'll make them all stop.
Yeah, exactly. And, my case didn't get a huge amount of publicity, but look at the level of publicity that this case is getting. I mean, it's all over the media. It's getting huge amounts of coverage on phone-ins. Roger's statement, has been viewed, I don't know, over 1.5 million times on Twitter now. So, yeah, it's an awful position that we are in as humanity, and there are so many people who care deeply, and the vast majority of people who wrote to me in prison were just expressing their absolute grief and terror and fear for their children and their grandchildren, and that's where the motivation comes from.
And the feeling that nothing else we've tried works, therefore we will try this. And I mean, if this doesn't work, then you'll have to find something else to do. How did you feel when the judge described you as cynically using your disability to draw attention? That was an interesting phrase. I hope you don't mind me asking, James. I'm just reading. Judge Gregory Perrin said Brown from Exeter, who has been registered blind since birth, cynically used his disability and put his own life at risk when he staged his protest at London City Airport. That, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that speaks of a complete disconnect, because you would use anything to draw attention to this cause because you consider this cause to be so urgent, right? And that's the point that the judiciary misses when it comes up against people like you and indeed like Roger Hallam and his colleagues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to feel about what he said about cynically using my disability. I'm not even sure I know what he meant. But
no,
I mean,
I'm not sure I do either. Well, I suppose it meant perhaps the authorities could have been more robust with you if you weren't blind. I don't know.
I don't think so. I think I was treated the same as anybody would have been.
Strange. one thing you did say is that you don't want to be jailed again. So people listening to this might be thinking, oh, well, it worked then.
Well, I mean, there are plenty of people in this movement. There are plenty of concerned citizens around the world who are taking action. There's only so much one individual can do, and being prepared to give up one's liberty for the sake of the biggest crisis that humanity has ever faced. I think that's a sentiment that very many people share.
Can't get past that. The biggest crisis that humanity has ever faced. James, thank you. I'm very, very helpful. As I said before, James came on. The number of perspectives that we've managed to explore on this programme has been absolutely breathtaking. And then up pops James, who was one of the first people, I think, possibly the first person to be jailed for peaceful protest for climate activism. 1 year, 2021. Massive deterrent, because yesterday they sent someone down for 5 years, simply for conspiring to block traffic. Speaking of disruption, LBC's reporter Victoria Innes is at Gatwick Airport now, where we are witnessing some of the fallout from this IT outage, this CrowdStrike IT outage. Victoria, what's going on?
Hi, James. Yes, there are huge amounts of people here at Gatwick Airport. I've been here now for a couple of hours, and they just keep getting bigger, growing, snaking all the way around the airport. Everywhere I look, there are queues of people sitting on the floor with their bags, looking understandably frustrated. I mean, pretty much every airline I can see queues at British Airways, TUI, Vueling Airline have just announced via a woman with a megaphone that any flights due to take off before 10 a.m., those people should just go home and contact Vueling when they get there. Some people, when that announcement was made, they shouted, they were visibly annoyed. One woman told me she's due to fly to a wedding today. She'd been at the airport since 5 a.m. She was getting upset, as you can imagine. She said she's had no information until now, and now she's just been told to go home. And a lot of people, just trying to speak to anyone from these airlines, a lot of them having no success. Some airlines, one of them telling people to fill in a manual boarding pass with their flight information and then go to him to be checked off a list. But, as more and more people are arriving for those flights, the queues are just getting longer and longer. You can see some staff are getting frustrated because, they don't have the information to give people. People are getting frustrated because they have no information. Bottles of water being handed out to people. Tannoy announcements just saying that, the airlines are working as quickly as they can to fix the problem. But it's really just, increasingly frustrated people here at Gatwick.
And are any planes taking off?
It seems that there are planes taking off. It seems that those people who have baggage to check in, those people who haven't been able to check in at home, they are experiencing most of the delays. But as I say, Vueling has decided that any of those flights due to take off pre-10 a.m. are just not going anywhere, and all of those people should just go home. So, look, while there are flights taking off, it is increasingly frustration, chaos, I would say, here at the moment. And just no sign of anything getting any better at the moment.
Victoria Innes live at Gatwick, where the situation is clearly absurd. The fallout from the CrowdStrike IT outage, and of course it won't just be that airport, it will be loads of them, and ports, as we heard earlier. The Lowestoft has been hit. I know that Dover has been hit. Gatwick, as we've just heard, has been hit. Govia Thameslink, which runs the Southern Thameslink Gatwick Express services through Kent and Surrey, have had issues as well. But it is international. These outages, these IT outages, are affecting airlines, media, banks, all around the world. The problem has been identified. The fix exists. I think Felixstowe, Neil's been in touch, say Felixstowe port is now open again. So the question becomes, as Phil points out, goodness knows how long the people responsible for this outage are going to be jailed for. I mean, they may not have planned it, but my goodness me, they've caused a hell of a lot more disruption, haven't they, than the 5 Just Stop Oil protesters who've just received 21 years in prison centres between them. So you have to presume that the big directors of these tech companies are going to be going down for decades. That was irony, or possibly sarcasm. I think that's it, actually. I've got to squeeze in Lavinia because she's been waiting so long, but you have to do it in a minute, Lavinia. What did you want to say?
Hi, Hi, James.
Hello.
Good morning to you. James, a slightly different angle, really. I just sit here thinking, gosh, the PR and the marketing teams that, represent the oil and gas industry must be laughing on the other side of their faces this morning, because all our focus is on the protest.
Oh, hang on a minute. What if I told you, as a bit of a pet subject of mine, a bit of a hobby horse of mine, what if I told you that one of the secretly funded think tanks that is known to have taken money at some point from fossil fuel companies was actually responsible for helping to draft the legislation that is contained within this policing bill?
Well, there you go.
Hang on, you're supposed to go, no way, that didn't happen, did it?
Yes, well, nothing surprises me anymore.
Well, that surprised me, and I thought I was unsurprisable. I think it was policy exchange, and Rishi Sunak let it slip during a speech there shortly before he ceased to be Prime Minister. But yeah, I mean, the idea that we're talking more about the 5 protesters than we are about the impacts of the fossil fuels is just a sign of the times, a mark of the zeitgeist, and I don't know how to fix it. It is 3 minutes after 12, and it is across the Atlantic again for us. And the tone has changed. I think we felt it changing, didn't we, last time we talked about it? The sense that Joe Biden's position had become unsustainable. It was probably unsustainable after that debate, when it didn't really matter what Donald Trump did. I think you could tell. I should have spotted this at the time. I'm sure other people did. But for Donald Trump to be in a debate and not be the main talking point after the debate is a sign of something extraordinary having happened. Because Donald Trump, like the pigeon that pushes all the pieces over on the chessboard and then struts around the place pooing and claiming that he's won, you were going to be talking about the pigeon. No one's going to remember who they were playing against. But for Joe Biden to be the main talking point after that presidential election, I would have expected the countless lies that Donald Trump told. 22, I think, was the measure. I haven't seen the fact check on the speech he gave to his convention yesterday. It should have clocked at the time, shouldn't we? That if we're talking about Joe Biden, that is absolutely huge, because the media still hasn't learned how not to talk so much about Donald Trump, or at least how to talk about him in a more accurate and helpful way. So we talked about it twice. We did it immediately after the debate, and then I think we did it about a week later. And certainly by the second conversation, the sense that it was becoming inevitable or feeling inevitable was irresistible. And I think, and I only really bet the house on my Brexit predictions, and those are over now forever. I'm going to have to find a new area of I nearly said necromancy. That's definitely not what I mean. I've got to find a new area of prediction. I think he'll be gone. I mean, just judging by the tone of the reporting, you don't get British journalists, the US editors of British newspapers writing about senior Democrats believing Biden could pull out as soon as tomorrow, as soon as Saturday morning. The New York Times has reported that he is becoming more receptive to pleas for him to stand aside. Crucially, I think Barack Obama is widely reported now as expressing serious concerns. He did so yesterday. Private warnings from 3 senior figures were made to the president last week. It's become unsustainable. The danger now is, of course, that Trump is too far ahead for any candidate to reel him back in again. And listen, I fully appreciate there'll still be people listening to this program who don't think that's a danger. Maybe just have a listen to this. This is what is happening to American politics in real time at the Republican National Convention. You know, the stage upon which Ronald Reagan and George Bush would once have stood.
When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next president of the United States, enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America great again.
That's the wrestler Hulk Hogan, who was fired, wasn't he, in 2015 after tape emerged of him repeatedly using the N-word while complaining about his daughter's sexual relationship with a black man. So, I mean, he'd fit right in with Donald Trump's inner circle. But that is, I mean, the point at which you wonder what else there is to say may have been passed some time ago. I don't have that luxury. You don't have to say anything. I do this for a living. I don't think Biden will be in the race, and I think that will emerge over the course of the weekend. I'll start by asking you, I mean, can you see any way in which Biden stays? 0345 6060 973. But then I find myself in that rare position of needing to rely upon you to tell me stuff about which you know more than I do. I don't mean that's rare. I mean how little I know. I mean it's all about polling, really. Does anybody else have insights into whether or not removing Biden increases the chances of stopping Trump? We were trying to pin down. Phone lines are open on this, by the way. I'm not going to give you a particularly unexpected or sparklingly original question. Is Biden going to go? 0345 6060 973. And will it make any difference? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I think Joe Biden is a perfectly good candidate, personally, in objective terms, in terms of his mental capacity. But he can't produce it on the day. There will be too many moments of slowness, and that is all that anybody is going to be talking about. It's grossly unfair in some ways, although 81 and age-related decline would play a part if he was up against a different candidate. But because he's up against Trump, it is a unique set of circumstances. So the bit I don't know much about, I've got a very strong opinion that he's going to go, but I don't have a strong opinion on whether or not it's going to make much difference. And you have to presume that if people like Barack Obama are increasingly keen for him to go, that they believe somebody else would do better. Or is it just the case that Joe Biden is so bad that it's become we can't put him up even if the other person doesn't do any better? And what we tried to identify in the last conversation is what an undecided might look like. I still can't quite conceive of the existence of somebody who is watching this election battle unfold and oscillating between the two. This may be a failure on my part. Maybe you know somebody who does literally move between the madness of Trump and the fragility of Biden. And listen, Trump misspeaks all the time. The internet is full of examples of Donald Trump losing his thread or falling asleep or walking off stage in the wrong direction. But it doesn't happen in quite the same way that it's happening to Biden. But I don't see the waverer. So that opens the question of what difference a change of candidate makes. I think that they would be betting the house on the existence of people who couldn't vote for Donald Trump in a million years, but who watch the public fragility of Joe Biden and find themselves thinking, well, I can't vote for that either. And perhaps they don't feel the threat that Trump poses to democratic norms. They haven't spent the last 4 years swatting up on what happened on January the 6th or how excited the Kremlin is at the appointment of J.D. Vance as his vice presidential running mate. Just normal people with normal lives who couldn't vote for Trump. But you know what? Look how doddery Joe Biden is. I can't vote for him either. So that, it seems to me, that's the Obi-Wan Kenobi for American democracy. That is the last hope. That is the only chance that American democracy has, is that there are enough voters in America perturbed by Trump and unenthused by Biden to the point where they're not going to vote at all, who will discover their desire to exercise their democratic rights in the event of a younger, more vibrant candidate being presented to them by the Democrats. Now, and again, there'll be people listening who know more about this than I do. My understanding was, and it was an interview I heard elsewhere with a senior fundraiser for the Democrats and an old friend of Joe Biden who moved quite early to certainly sound as though she was open to the possibility of a candidate change. And the way she explained it, there is only one possibility, and that is Kamala Harris, because the money raised on a Biden-Harris ticket has to go to Biden or Harris. You couldn't have a ticket on which neither of them appeared without entering into very complicated contractual and financial situations. I think she was asked, why can't you just give it back and then they can donate it again? But even that sort of prompts problems and complications and contractual wriggles. So I think that Kamala Harris is the only contender. I could be completely wrong about that. And certainly a lot of the American coverage suggests that it could be a 2 or a 3 horse race, but they haven't really got time to do that properly. And I just found this particular witness, this particular contributor, very compelling and very convincing. But I'm basing all of it on that and that alone, that contribution alone. What I don't know is whether or not it would make any difference at all. Whether or not Trump's position now is so removed from reality. He has a worldwide wrestling hero. Well, I mean, established racist. Deployer of the word that usually ends careers, making a comeback. And I know that WWE took him back a few years later after he apologized endlessly and worked to address his problems. But you can't imagine he's moved that far away from using the N-word to describe a man that was having a relationship with his daughter if he's turned up to call Donald Trump his hero. And that is, I mean, how do you, whoever your candidate is, who do you need? Giant haystacks? Or Andre the Giant? What do you do? How do you, if that is politics now, what does opposition look like? If the opposition is driving a clown car and people are loving it, what the heck do you turn up in? What vehicle do you turn up in? Or do you just hope that Kamala Harris or whoever it may be can just, A, perform well at events, if there are more debates, run some of the rings around Donald Trump that would be relatively easy to run if you took him on toe-to-toe, or just offer up a sort of calm sanity versus wild insanity. That simple offer of a bit Starmer-ish, actually. And Biden can't do Starmer, can he now? Because the questions are legion. Biden can't do Starmer. I never thought I'd see it that way around. Sometimes it takes me a bit by surprise when something pops into my head live on the radio. Then I'll spend the next junction thinking, oh dear, should I have said that out loud? But I think this one works. Biden can't do Starmer because questions about his competence. That was the one thing Starmer never had. Questions about his courage, questions about his charisma, but the quiet competence that had taken him to the head of the Department of Public Prosecutions, that was always his trump card, pardon the pun. Biden hasn't got that. Biden can't do Starmer, but somebody else could. So what is your alternative to the fantasy island represented by Donald Trump? Well, in this country, what is your alternative to the fantasy island represented by Johnson and Truss and later, unexpectedly, Sunak? All of these completely reality-denying politicians. Well, you just need calm and stable. Could work, couldn't it? And I don't think Biden can do calm and stable now because there are moments when he looks neither, or he might look too calm and not stable. It's 12:16. Your thoughts on this after this? This is probably it, I think, and the stability, the future of the free world might depend on it. Stephen says Biden's got no chance. Someone else has half a chance, and there it is. And Brian is in Florida. It says very similarly. He says we can't know if it will make any difference, but at least it gives us a chance. With Biden, we are doomed. I tell you, doomed. Quite a few little nods towards classics of British comedy in the course of today's programme. 18 minutes after 12 is the time. Lisa is in Southampton. Lisa, what do you reckon?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I've talked to you before.
You have. About matters adjacent to this one.
Yeah. I think they have to go with Kamala. She's on the ballot in all the states, so she's already been primaried. As you say, the funding is absolutely, she has the funding.
Yes.
And so they cannot start from scratch at this time. Nobody is going to, she's already got, and I think the donors that were reticent because of Biden will now come through. And have you noticed that Kamala's been a lot more on the news?
Yes.
Because they're already polling to see what her numbers are. And she does poll better than Biden.
Are you sure? I'm not doubting you.
She's slightly up from Biden. Now she's
and that's
still
that's from whatever is below a standing start. That's without any kind of papa at all, isn't it?
Yeah, but I don't know what Trump will attack her on, and he will attack her on the border. But there was a border bill by Jim Lankford, and actually that was a great border bill, and Trump told him not to put it through. So that it could become an electoral issue, and she's got the acuity and the speed on her feet to make these points. Well, she was a prosecutor. She was a really good prosecutor, and she was a senator, so she's got the.
But whose votes are up for grabs? That's the bit.
It's the independents. It's the Nikki Haley voters that wanted Nikki Haley, and they were not bothered at all. She was a woman. In fact, they thought.
And she doesn't take Nikki Haley doesn't take these votes with her into Trump's pocket, which is where she is now.
Well, the thing is that we all know that Nikki Haley now has endorsed Trump, but that's through clenched teeth. She literally hasn't overdone it. But what we have up our sleeves as the Democrats is Project 2025.
Yeah, if it
lands.
And
that is huge. And Kamala's been talking about that the last 2 weeks, and that will take us back to the 1960s. And Kamala, what is he going to do? Is he going to attack her because she's a woman or because she's mixed race? And I think the young people, which we need, and also the African-American community, which we definitely need, will come for Kamala. Now, her running mate, now this is just something that, to me, would get every young person out, is Pete Buttigieg. And he's a Rhodes Scholar. He would actually wipe the floor with J.D. Vance.
He's gay. And I mentioned that.
Gay, but you know what? The young people, which are the 18 to 24-year-olds, which we can't seem to get to the polls, plus even my age group, I don't care if he's gay.
No, I know that, but that's why I'm constantly obsessing about which votes are up for grabs. And if you have a problem with gay men or women or people of colour, you're unwinnable. Trump's got you.
They're usually MAGA voters.
Trump's got you all day long. There's nothing that could. They could put George Clooney up, or they could put Hulk Hogan up as the Democrat candidate. But no one's ever going to be as appealing to the racists and the homophobes and the misogynists as Donald Trump is.
Yeah, and also the family value thing with Pete Buttigieg, happily married, 2 children. Great, incredible transport secretary, and also very well respected by the blue collar workers because he was a mayor in a small Rust Belt town, and he's a war veteran.
Okay, I'm going to go geeky now, and this, I don't know that many people will come with us on the next bit, Lisa, but I'm off for a couple of weeks now, so I'm going to fill my boots. What about Gretchen Whitmer?
Now, she's a possibility, but I do not think the country's ready for 2 women. I like Gretchen very much, and that would be great. But obviously, also, they talked about Gavin Newsom, but that's a no-go because they're both from California. Okay. That can't happen.
And do you know anything about the finances, that, as I mentioned before? It has to be Kamala, does it? Because of that?
It has to be Kamala because...
Is it Kamala or Kamala?
Kamala. Well, I call her Kamala.
Okay, because I got told off for how I pronounced it last week. I thought I'd corrected it correctly, and now you're here.
I think it's just, I call her Kamala, but...
Tomato.
But she, the thing is, it's the finances that she has because she's on the ticket. Plus, it would be very upsetting if all of a sudden, plus, she's got a run on Biden's record, which actually is very, very good.
That's very true.
It's very good, but he has not been able to articulate that.
He just hasn't, has he? So there's no doubt in your mind that he's toast.
And I like Joe Biden. Sure. I tell you, I've been voting Democrat since 1976. Even my grandparents in 1932 voted Democrat, and I like Joe Biden.
Of course, no. Well, I mean, he's a very hard man not to like, isn't he? In the sense of how kind he is.
But also, don't forget, in this country, obviously, I'm Labour, Lib Dem, and I think for Keir Starmer, obviously, he would rather have Kamala in there than J.D. Vance and Trump because
for sure.
Much more aligned. And I think the special relationship will be really, really tested, especially when you look at Angela Rayner and David Lammy. They will go for him. because they have been very, very outspoken against Trump.
Well, Lammy is being a little bit more pragmatic, perhaps, than some people were expecting when it comes to recognising that you have to shake hands with people that you would rather not shake hands with if you are to exercise international diplomacy. But, obviously, from the point of view of a Labour government or a Conservative government headed up by someone sensible, having someone sensible in the White House is infinitely preferable to having a president who people have compared to Hitler and a vice president who has compared the president to Hitler. Lisa, thank you. I mentioned Andre the Giant earlier. I don't know if you're familiar with him. So I played a little clip. Can we have a tiny snatch of Hulk Hogan, please? Just to give you a little indication of how utterly bonkers things are. This guy is famous for being a wrestler, subsequently infamous for being a racist, and now, resurrected as a cheerleader for Donald Trump.
When they took a shot at my hero.
So I wondered out loud what we could do to battle that as a candidate or as an endorsement. I don't think Andre the Giant's with us anymore, is he? I think he passed away, but he was a very, very famous wrestler. And Emma sent me a quote from Andre the Giant. If you've enjoyed, and this is, I tell you what, if I'm about to mention a film now, and if you haven't seen it, especially if you've got children, you will be thanking me all weekend. Fans of The Princess Bride will love Andre the Giant and will know exactly who I'm talking about. But here's a quote from Andre the Giant. He said, "I don't like to speak badly of people. I have grown up thinking and being told that if you cannot say something nice about someone, you should not say anything at all. But I must break that rule in this case because I hate Hulk Hogan very much. He is a big, ugly goon and I want to squash his face." Quite prescient there from Andre the Giant. John's in Plymouth. John, what would you like to say?
Hi. I would just like to say that I've been watching Trump with horror over the last 4 or 5 years, and just watching the slow, it's like water going down the bathhouse. Yes. It is just incredible what is happening, and that people are just slowly walking to what will be the end of democracy.
They're not slowly walking. They're not slowly walking, John. They're sprinting and cheering and climbing up on Hulk Hogan's shoulders.
I was trying to be kind.
Yes, but it's not. I mean, that's because I'm not. If it was a slow, I'd get my head around it. But I mean, what is so obvious to so many is attractive to others for some reason.
Oh, and members of my family, a couple of my sisters, would be Trump's biggest fans.
And if you said why, what would they say?
If I said why, because they believe what he says. They don't question it. They don't go to Reuters. They don't look up on anything else. They are stuck on Facebook. I told my sister that I didn't think Facebook made her happy.
But she just believes it. So London is an Islamist state. The UK is going to become the first.
Anything that comes up, and it's true, and we'll offer that to you as proof. Yeah, but we got proof. Where have you got it?
Facebook.
Yeah.
I think we probably underestimated how far into people's minds that all of that stuff was reaching, and we were early adopters because I was getting sent it all the time. And probably didn't take it as seriously as I should have done because I didn't think anybody sensible could believe any of it. And now we find ourselves in a world where people believe obviously and insanely untrue things, but they don't seem to be vaguely troubled by what I would once have thought of as the non-negotiable parameters of reality. But do you think changing candidate will make any difference at this point, John?
Yeah, you can't go with him. Yeah. It has to. He may. I mean, I think he's done okay. I think he's done okay in the economy. And
he's done better than okay under most readings, but you need to be a salesman. It's not just about the quality of the product, is it? You need to be able to sell what the product is, and that just isn't happening. John, thank you. It's coming up to 29 minutes after 12. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Walter will be up first after the headlines, but a couple of things I wanted to bring to your attention while I remember. The first, I don't know if you were listening to yesterday's conversation about fertility, and one caller, it was a gentleman who was about to embark upon, I think, the last chance saloon. You remember he'd had a cancer in his youth and the percentage chances were about 5%, and you could tell he was more worried about the potential disappointment of his partner than he was about his own situation, but incredibly generous. But he said, when he was talking about the money, he said, and all the extras, because it's the extras that are expensive. And I let it slide at the time. But we've had 3 cycles of IVF, as you know, or 2 cycles of IVF, as you know. And the extras, if you're doing it privately, can really ramp up the bills, which is why I just wanted to bring this story to your attention in the Times today. An expensive fertility technology marketed to increase the chances of IVF treatment has been shown to have no effect on its success, a study has found. Time-lapse imaging, where thousands of images are taken of an embryo while it is developing, is intended to increase success rates by allowing clinicians to select embryos based on their rate of development or the number and appearance of cells. The technique has been criticised by the fertility regulator, which said that add-ons and non-essential treatments were being sold by some private IVF clinics. Time-lapse imaging can add at least £500 to the cost of a cycle, and researchers at Queen Mary University in London have found that the treatment did not improve the odds of women successfully giving birth. So I just wanted to give you a quick heads up on that. A, to draw your attention to the broader issue, and B, to give you the information you need if you're facing that decision anytime soon. Respect to Alan. If you know, you know. He's got in touch to say, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. It's 12:30. Jenny Barsby has the headlines. 12:34 is the time. 22 provable lies in that acceptance speech by Donald Trump, as far as the fact checkers have been able to establish. But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. And that's the mad thing. I don't know how any of us really have failed to get our head around how you cover politics when lies are completely normalised. I've said it to you 1,000 times that when Kellyanne Conway, who used that phrase, alternative facts, to describe lies, something broke that takes generations to repair. And if Trump gets back in, well, the prospect of things never being repaired in our lifetimes becomes very, very real, which is why the question of whether or not replacing Joe Biden is going to make any difference at all is a matter of international urgency, way beyond America. 12:34 is the time. The number you need is 0345 6060973. Before I talk to Walter, I want you to take a guess. If I told you that I've got 5 people standing in for me next week from the world of politics, 3 Conservatives and 2 Labour, although a couple of the Conservatives are no longer actually MPs, who do you think is the least likely current Conservative MP to sit in my chair on Tuesday of next week? I want you to use your text 84850, or you can WhatsApp 0345 6060973. If I told you, what is the name I could say at 12:59 today when I run through a list of who is standing in for me next week? And don't forget that a lot of the Labour politicians who've stood in for me before aren't available because they're now running the country. They're now in the cabinet. Jeremy Hunt did this shift. And 6 months later, he was Chancellor of the Exchequer. It's like it's like a propulsion. It's like a turbocharge for political. Well, no, it's not really. But who do you reckon it would be? No, it's got to be a serving MP. Half of the names you're sending me have already been chucked out. Gullis and Rees-Mogg they're long gone. The question becomes that someone with a seat currently serving in Parliament is doing my holiday cover on Tuesday. What is the last name on earth you would expect me to announce at 12:59 today? It can't be Rees-Mogg. Stop sending me Rees-Mogg. He's not an MP. Hallelujah. Who do you think it's going to be? 12:36 is the time. There goes my inbox. Walter's in Dundee. Walter, what do you reckon? Back to Biden.
Well, from a Jersey boy who's now living in Arizona, I totally agree. I think America is actually goose-stepping over into the end of democracy. But I really feel that if Biden has to come out, of course, that's a natural.
Have you got something on in the background? Sorry to be rude, but I'm just. Have you got? Can we turn that off?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's okay, Walter. I appreciate it. So sorry, you're about to address the prospect of Biden stepping down.
Yeah, and I think definitely if Harris runs and takes Newsom from California, then she could run the abortion ticket. Newsom, when he debates J.D. Vance, I think he could be all over.
You think it could be that big a deal? Because I think the line I'm most seduced by at the moment is the idea that with Biden we don't have a chance and with Harris we have half a chance. But you think it would be a more optimistic prospect than that?
With Harris and Newsom, yeah.
Why Newsom? Why not Harris and Buttigieg or Harris and Gretchen? What's her chops?
Gretchen would be great. Buttigieg would be great. I just think Newsom with California is the largest. So
he brings California.
I think he was being groomed for it way before. So I think he'd be brilliant. That's just a personal opinion. I'm sure
that's all we ever do on this show, mate. It's all personal opinions all over the place. But you would wake up on Monday morning with a Harris Newsom ticket and think we're going to be okay.
I think we would have a better chance. Right now, we have absolutely no chance whatsoever, and it's just terrible. I just walked past. I was in St. Andrews, walked past the School for Moral Theory, I think it was, and I said, I'm sure Trump wasn't there.
I've walked past that. I walked past that as well. Isn't St. Andrews beautiful, by the way? Is it your first visit?
No, we come back. Usually it would be pre-COVID every summer because my best friend is my tennis partner when I was teaching film production in Germany. So he works here and
fantastic. Final question.
Sure.
Who are the voters that are up for grabs here? Who are the people who will be changed by a change of candidate?
All the people who are saying right now, I'm not going to vote for Biden. I don't have a choice.
But they're not going to vote for Trump either.
No, but they would vote for. First woman. Listen, I'm dying to have the first woman vice president of the United States. I'm dying, and to have a first woman who's also of color, and hopefully I live through that in my lifetime. I'm 76. I'd like to live through that.
Yeah. Could be quite special, actually. I mean, goodness knows. I don't think anybody wants to allow them to the hopium to run through the veins too violently. But imagine if, come November, the forces of decency and progressiveness are actually celebrating rather than mourning. It would be quite a moment. I'm going to play you a little bit of the CNN fact checker. Just as an indication of what normality looks like. So on one hand, you've got Hulk Hogan bellowing to a baying crowd, and on the other, this is what happens when the journalists come into the room.
The world was at peace. Our opponents inherited a world at peace and turned it into a planet of war. We're in a planet of war. The whole world was at peace, and now the world is blowing up around us.
This is false. Trump did not achieve world peace when he was president, certainly wasn't at peace when he left office. There were active wars or armed conflicts in dozens of nations in 2020, 51 by one research institution's count, and then 51 again in 2021. Trump handed President Biden ongoing civil wars in Yemen and Syria, of course, an unresolved Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Israeli-Iranian conflict, a war in Ethiopia. I could go on for a while, but I don't have time because there were so many other false claims. So let's adjust some of those, not even all of them. He repeated his usual lie about Democrats having cheated in the 2020.
So, and just a little flavour there of what a fact check sounds like. That fade out there was part of the edit. It wasn't a deliberate decision by somebody in the CNN studio to fade out the fact checker, because only a massive amateur would ever deploy tactics like that in a live broadcast. Rochelle is in Lincoln. Rochelle, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
First-time caller, long-time listener.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I would say that it's a lose-lose for the American people, myself being one of them included. Yes, I am here in England, but watching the debates and knowing what the current events have just have happened with the Trump attempt assassination, I think he's just gained loads of momentum.
Oh, for sure.
And I would say that the Democratic Party they're in trouble. I really don't think there is another candidate that could go up against Trump right now.
But surely we could find someone better than Biden.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but you're saying it won't make much difference anyway.
No, I would say correct. I would say take him out now because he's already done so much damage for the American population for us. He has definitely tainted what we look like on the world stage. So, yeah, absolutely. Do that for...
Has he, though? I mean, tainted is a strong... I mean, you're talking about the man who's running at the moment against Donald Trump. If Joe Biden's tainting America on the world stage, what on earth is Donald Trump doing?
He has quite the following. So I am I'm quite the Democratic person. But I have to say, going up against Trump right now is like David and Goliath. Really, he is just a big monster.
For good or for ill. He's managed to harness some sort of magic dust, and you're right. The assassination attempt has added to his image, and he's done exactly what Eleanor said he would do. Actually, in that acceptance speech yesterday, he talked about a kind of almost messianic anointment, talked about how God had clearly decided to spare him, and people will be lapping that up. Whereas when Joe Biden talks about God, it's the God that you would recognise if you read the Bible. I always remember when they asked Donald Trump about the Bible, when he was, what's your favourite book? What's your favourite book? Or was it your favourite book? Your favourite part of the Bible? He's obviously never opened it in his life, but he did that thing that BSers do all the time, and it's just as I think Rochelle alludes to, he's brilliant at it in a way. So what's your favourite part of the Bible? What would you say if you'd never read the Bible and you weren't very well informed, you didn't even off the top of your head remember any stories from the Bible? What would you say if someone said to you, what's your favourite part of the Bible? And you knew that people who call themselves Christians are queuing up to endorse you and support you. You're sort of campaigning on to be fair, it's more of an anti-Muslim ticket, but a lot of people like to pretend that it's a Christian ticket. What would you say if you had tried to give the impression that you were a Christian, but you'd never opened the Bible, and someone said, what's your favourite part of the Bible, Mr. Trump? What would you say? Because he said it. He said, all of it. But they tried to push it. They said, but you must have all of it. All of it. It's great. It's fantastic, that. I have a terrible admission to make. And I was being interviewed for a university place, and I was asked what Shakespeare play I was qualified to talk about. And I said all of them. Like an absolute idiot. I said all of them. And of course, I meant all the big ones. But immediately, the Don says, "Oh, splendid! We'll talk about Timon of Athens then, shall we?" And I'm like, "Oh my days! I've never heard of that. Let alone." When I said all of them, I meant like the Scottish play, Hamlet, Lear, Midsummer Night's Dream, Comedy of Errors. I mean, probably 10, 15, like big, regularly produced. But that was someone but silly. What Trump did was, I thought, exemplary. All of it. What's your favourite part of the Bible? All of it. It's 12:45. It is 12:47, 12 minutes until I reveal who will be doing my holiday cover next week. And a lot of suggestions coming in. I'm going to tell you who it isn't. Rishi Sunak getting a lot of votes. It's not Rishi Sunak. Liam says, is it Catamaran Boy? He's not in Parliament anymore. It's someone who is currently a Tory MP who, when I say who is the last person on earth you would expect to be presenting my show if you tune in on Tuesday, what answer would you give? So it can't be the... no longer MP, and now very busy doing skydiving, motorbike racing, and what was it? Yeah, skydiving, motorcycling, and fast catamaran racing. Sailing, hard man of Brexit. Steve, can't be him. It's not Penny Mordaunt. I don't think it's Penny. Is Penny Mordaunt doing anything for us? No, not. Has she done anything before? No. It's not Jeremy Hunt, actually. He's had a go before. He was quite good at it. The team liked him. Matt Hancock no longer an MP. Boris Johnson no longer an MP. It's not Kemi Badenoch, and it's not Laura Trott, and it's not James Cleverly. It's not Mark Francois, and it's not Honest Bob Jenrick. So who could it be? Who is the last person on earth, a Conservative MP currently serving, that you would expect to be presenting this programme when you tune in at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning? 12:49 is the time. Nancy is in Colville. Nancy, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello.
Thanks for taking my call.
You're most welcome, Nancy. How lovely to hear from you.
Well, I'm another American who lives in Britain, thank goodness. And I never want to go back there, but I think I'll have to because I have family. But it was just the remark that Hulk Hogan made. He said, they tried to kill my hero. Yeah. Who is he referring to when he says they? Because as far as I know, it was just one badly bullied young man who took a pot shot.
And indeed a registered Republican.
Republican.
He's not the first, is he, to have said that? This idea that that he somehow represents this mythical group of people, where, because the media are conspiring against him by pointing out all of his lies and reminding people of things that he's said and done. The judiciary is conspiring against him by holding him to account for his crimes or in other cases investigating them. So I suppose it's the forces of reality. And to conflate them with an attempted assassin, I mean, I think we all know exactly what they're doing, don't we?
Well, they don't even mention this poor lad by name anymore. They just call him the gunman.
Yeah, I mean, he did try to kill a president. I don't know that I personally would call him a poor lad. I understand the point that you're making, his mental frailty and his long history of being bullied, but it's not. I mean, it's. I have a tactic often of not mentioning the name of terrorists or particularly unpleasant characters because of the celebrity that they were clearly seeking, and we don't know much about him. But I think he's probably going to end up being filed under trying to be infamous, trying to secure immortality by doing. Because I was reading that he'd even been looking at Joe Biden as well in one report that I read, but it was just that the opportunity was quicker and sooner with Donald Trump than it would have been with Joe Biden. But yeah, when they say that's cultism. It's an enemy of the cult, turning everything into conspiracy. Two questions I've asked everybody else. Do you think Biden is going to go, and do you think it will make any difference to anything?
I think Biden will do the right thing and he won't stand. And I think there's a lot of voters in America who are just watching all this horrified and would love the chance to vote for somebody different.
Well, that is the big bet. That is the big hope. And I don't quite get it, because if I had a vote in America, I would vote for an Ottoman sofa in preference to Donald Trump. I'd vote for a slush puppy in preference to Donald Trump. But there are clearly people there whose relationship with democracy is different. I don't mean that as a criticism. I just mean it as a description. And they would be more likely to vote for a Democrat, more likely to vote at all in the event of Joe Biden no longer being in the race. I thank you, Nancy. I thought that this would be an 80% vote. I thought everybody would get it right first time. That the person like that you would least expect to be presenting this program when you tune in on Tuesday. But it's a very, very, very mixed field. 30p Lee's not a Conservative. Well, I should probably check that, but he certainly wasn't a Conservative MP when we came on air this morning. He was a Conservative MP this time last year, and then he wasn't. And now he's with Farage's outfit, I think. Nadine Dorries is no longer an MP. Andrew Mitchell, he's Shadow Foreign Secretary, I think. So I don't know that level. Are they allowed to? But no, it's not him. Quite a few of you are getting it right, but it's not Ian Duncan Smith. It's not Oliver Dowden, no. Quite a lot, but I thought that about 80% of you would get it right. But at the moment, the correct answer is only receiving about 40% of... Is it higher than that? All right, about 40%. It is quite high, but I thought that it would be even higher. I really did. John's in Reading, back to America. John, what would you like to say?
All right, James, nice to speak to you again, mate. So he is going to go by force because they're going to have to push him out. He's not going to want to go by himself. He's stubborn as heck. There is a candidate that hasn't been mentioned that would do extremely well and repair all of the damage that has been done. And he is one Bernie Sanders, who you have interviewed.
I like Bernie Sanders, but he's not a Democrat.
Now, this is the interesting part. Have you, by any chance, seen the Fox News town hall that he did? It was a full Republican town hall. At the start of it, they asked him, "Would you vote for Bernie Sanders before the election?"
Yeah, but you can't put an independent congressman, a man who's been elected to the Senate as an independent. He can't be put on the Democrat ticket for the presidential election, John.
Well, they did it in the Democratic primary. They did before, and the only reason he isn't the actual...
Well, he's an elected senator as an independent.
Yes, but he was actually on the primary for the 2022 primary. Was that correct?
No, there was no 2022.
No,
there was a presidential nominations in 2016 and 2020. But he was with the Senate Democrats then. He caucused. Well, maybe he still does. But listen, it might be fun. I'd quite like to see. He's even older than Joe Biden. But having spent 45 or 47 minutes with him earlier this year, I think he'd bounce Donald Trump around the room like a basketball. But it ain't ever going to happen. It ain't ever going to happen. But it doesn't mean it wouldn't be nice to see if it did. John, thank you, mate. Take care. I'm going to play you a little clip of full disclosure from this week, and then I'm going to tell you something really lovely that has happened that I only really noticed this week while doing a couple of other full disclosures that you'll be able to hear while I'm on holiday. So it is with the opera singer Russell Watson, about whom I knew quite a lot, but not as much as I do now.
Well, there was a singing competition, Piccadilly Radio, 11:52, Search for a Star, and there was a group of us out. Yeah. Everyone's going, go on, Russ, you sing a bit, don't you? Do your Beatles or whatever. I was like, nah, I'm all right. Pint down me. And then another one, go on, get up, give them a blast. What do you do? Tell them what song you want to sing. So I was like, no, go on. So anyway, cut a long story short, I did. I got up. Neil Diamond's Love on the Rocks was the song that I decided I was going to sing. Sang it. Big round of applause. End of the night, a few peanuts, another pint of Stella. And the winner tonight is Russell Watson. What? I've won. Anyway, round 2, won that. Semi-finals. It was I think it was called the Three Crowns. It was a big, much bigger pub.
Right.
And there was a lot of people there.
And did your pals come with you?
I think so, yeah. I can't remember. It's all quite vague because I just remember I was buzzing about the whole affair. I know a couple of the work lads came.
Right.
And I got up and I sang, and there was 10 of us that went to the final. And the final, which was held live on Piccadilly Radio and was voted for by the listeners.
Okay.
So all the 10 finalists were on the line waiting to find out who got the most votes. And I was thinking, that ain't going to be me, is it?
Yeah.
You know. But it was good I got this far and I did well. And then it went quiet, and the winner is, hello Russell, you've won. It was like the fake cheering in the background and everything, and I was like, really? Have I won? Yeah, you've won. It's like, oh, fantastic. And then I did, there was an agent, it was called Dave Oldfield, and I got this call, and basically saying, I want to book you to do some shows, in little pubs, as he put it. I want to book your kid to do some nice little pubs around the northwest area, and we're going to pay you between 55 and 60 quid a gig, and I reckon I can get you about 3 of these gigs a week. So I was on 90 quid a week at Sabre Repetition, and I'm thinking to myself, that's like 160, 170 quid. Yeah. Do you think you can get me a lot of work? I could as much work as you want, kid. Don't worry about it. And he did, to be fair to him. And that was it. I mean, I went into the factory, and I remember, my manager sat with his usual expression on his face when I walked in. He's like, "Hi, Russell. You all right, mate? What do you want?" So I'm just coming to tell you that I've won Piccadilly Radio Search for a Star. I said, and I'm going to be a singer. And he went, I'll see you next week, Russ.
It's one of those ones where you're going to think, who's the interviewer? It can't be James, because he can't get a word in edgeways. Russell Watson, though, the singer extraordinaire, but tales of brain tumours, singing for the Pope, meeting presidents, and absolutely an odyssey, an Odyssean life that he has led, and back in action now as a book on the way, and he's touring cathedrals of the country. I really liked him. He was lovely, and I hope you enjoy that. There's a couple of others in the hold for when I'm off over the next fortnight as well. The playwright and screenwriter James Graham, and the legend that is Robin Asquith. And the thing I just wanted briefly to mention, because I saw it this morning, that they're all linking together now. It's like we've created a full disclosure verse. Because talking to Robin Asquith about Sally Lindsay, who was on recently, to James Graham about Julie Hesmanhouse, who is in his play that is coming to London Punch about restorative justice that's coming next year. So there's loads of points in Full Disclosure now where we spot people who've got connections with previous guests on Full Disclosure. And the one with Robin Asquith, which you'll get either next Friday or the Friday after, is mad because he's been in the business for so long. He was in my favourite ever film, If, the Lindsay Anderson film. Carry On films, all the Confessions series, now Madame Blank Mysteries with Sally. He knows everyone. Anyway, speaking of people, next week Alicia Kearns will be presenting this programme on Friday. James Heapy will be presenting it on Thursday. Jonathan Ashworth will be presenting it on Wednesday. And on Monday at 10 o'clock, Emily Thornberry will be with you. And on Tuesday, it's Suella Braverman. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you'll find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as all of Global's live radio stations. Download Global Player for free from your App Store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Ben Kentish standing in for Tom Swarbrick. I'll see you in a fortnight, but for now, it's Sheila Fogarty. 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 Now, it's Sheila Fogarty.